This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to believe and had such a material motive for putting in a position on me. They'll never let the true facts come about what's to be for the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who is the grotto leader? You don't remember the name of the person who involved you in murder?
These people are in very high positions, yeah. Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 24. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, I guess I'm just going to say right off the bat that I feel, a certain weight has been lifted off our shoulders in terms of the minute-to-minute conspiracy theorizing that has plagued us, certainly for the last month or two, but really for the last, 4 years. And we've been very focused, if you will, on the terrestrial plane, and admittedly at that, not even a very sophisticated, focus on that terrestrial plane. We've been worried about P-tapes, phone calls, redoing the Rose Garden flowers, Hunter Biden's dick, crack rocks, things of that, business deal, LLC contracts, tax returns, and
when is Hillary going to be hung, etc. And pushing back the date. Talk about something that we had to wait forever for and never happened.
Right?
People thought they were being impatient with the election. Think about how the Q people felt.
They're having a rough one this week. They're having a rough one. But even out on the bleeding edge of QAnon, you never really saw them diving over the threshold, piercing the veil.
Or soaring, yeah. Last week, on Alwara, we kind of were, diving into the subterranean sphere, or the, beyond the threshold of the deep. And now we're going to a different type of deep, into the depths of the unknown. Above, we're watching the skies.
That's right. We're all going to school today because for the next 2 to almost 3 hours, we're going to be enrolling all of y'all in the To the Stars Academy, and you're going to graduate with a master's degree in the truth.
Yes. First off, so this is actually kind of our first episode that we've actually really dealt with the world of ufology. We did our Urantia episode. We've talked about ETs. We've kind of been slowly we in the Lily episode that we just did for Awara, we kind of got to some ET stuff. We've been brushing up against it. We've never really done an episode that was really straight up, Grays, E.T., Roswell, UFOs.
Zeta Reticulans.
Yeah. Betty and Barney Hill, etc. Project Blue Book, blah, blah. So, have you ever seen a UFO, Dimitri?
No, though I know people who claim to have.
I actually, just like I had a prophetic dream about 9/11, I actually have seen a UFO. But
really?
Yeah, but it didn't have the 5 observables according to the Stars Academy. It didn't do any of the cool, it didn't zigzag around really what it seemed like. I was coming up out of the subway in New York around I think it was on Avenue of the Americas, like 6th Avenue. Like kind of near Washington. I think maybe like 14th Street and 6th Avenue. I might have even been coming back from where you live, but I'm not sure if that was the case. But anyway, so yeah, and as I was getting out of the subway, I saw like this thing in the sky that was like this wisp of fire. That was like twisting upwards. You know, I would have like, you know, if I was gonna say like it was something, it almost kind of looked like there was like a hot air balloon. Like my thought was like, is that like a hot air balloon that like, you know, has the fire going, but I can't see it. But of course, like it wasn't that because it would have illuminated the whole balloon. But it was basically just like this floating like fiery thing that was kind of like drifting upwards into the sky, and it. You know, it could have been like maybe like some flaming, I don't know. It was bizarre. I didn't like, it didn't do any kind of like typical UFO stuff. It didn't look like a saucer, but I did see that UFO. It was a UFO in the sense of like the Jimmy Carter sense of like, you know, like I could not identify what it was, you know, like I could, I don't know what it was. I'm not going to say that it was an ET, but I did see that strange thing in the sky. Yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
I was like big into UFOs like when I was young, like super big into them, like and into all paranormal things in general. I guess I was probably a little bit like Tom, one of our you know, main characters in this podcast, Tom DeLonge, who was you know, really into that stuff, and formerly of Blink-182, who I guess would like, you know, while his tour bus was parked or whatever, would be like, come on, guys, we were going to go find Bigfoot, like, in the woods, you know, like, I was really into all that, like, you know, stuff growing up, and one of the things that just really, like, blew my mind, and, like, you know, is something that I actually saw while reading up for this episode. I saw Tom DeLonge kind of promoting, which was when I used to play the oboe. And my oboe teacher was like this kind of cool young, you know, like she seemed obviously like an adult, but like he was probably younger than I am now. And she like, you know, I asked her like some kind of philosophical question about like God or Jesus, and she was like, you know, I was like, do you think like Jesus was God or whatever? And she's like, you don't want to know what I think. And I was like, no, like, you know, of course I was like in, you know, 8th grade or like 6th grade, like somewhere there, you know, so like, you know, I was like, no, come on, you know, and she was like, no, and I was like, no, please, you know, like, she's like, okay, fine, like, and I distinctly remember she goes like, I believe that the Virgin Mary was abducted by aliens and impregnated, and the baby that she had was Jesus or whatever.
Wow.
And that just like blew my mind. And you know, like for a while, you know, I was big into that type of stuff. And I think I saw some article where Tom DeLonge was floating the same idea that, like, you know, oh, the star, you know, was it a star or was it a craft, you know?
He actually did mention, I think, at one point that the possibility that aliens were present at the birth of Jesus.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I almost feel like, and I think we're going to go into some of these theories in this episode, like sort of the Jack Foray type of theories, who sort of adjacent to that whole group now, it seems. But, you know, I really think for a while, yeah, I was like, you know, when I was young, I was really into all paranormal things, always entertaining things, but, you know, not like a very big God believer, like very atheistic, like very much like new atheist type. Then I went through, you know, a while of being kind of dismissive of the paranormal in general, you know, like the whole, like, where's the evidence, blah, blah, blah. Then, you know, when I became more religious, I started to get, you know, more open to the paranormal again. And I think that the kind of binary that's implicit in some of that, like, stuff like, oh, you know, like, really, the Chariot of Fire was like a UFO. Like, I think that stuff is, like, kind of a red herring. And I think that instead of, like, saying, like, you know, going back and, like, redrawing these stories from the Bible, like, in terms of, like, UFO stuff, it's sometimes more helpful to, like, consider this contemporary UFO stuff through, like, a religious paradigm rather than vice versa, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And, but I think we'll go into some of that, because there's also some very terrestrial susness going
on. Of course.
In this whole domain.
And I regret that I think it's perhaps outside of the scope of our episode today, mainly because I ordered this book several weeks ago and then it was canceled and I never received it. But the book American Cosmic, which I think came out a year or two ago, I want to say by Diana Pasulka, in 2019, and she particularly explores the intersections of like UFOs, religion, and technology in that book. I had heard a few interviews with her, but I think that's like a spot on kind of vector to approach this from, is the religious aspect in a kind of lowercase r sense of people's faith in UFOs. And I mean, it almost, you could launch into like such a deep wormhole, or so many different wormholes when you start to get into the more speculative culture around like who are flying these secret machines or these UFOs and things like that. And I think you're right also that that's where we get into a lot of susness in these stories. But I think today maybe we can, I'm sure like Jacques Vallée, who appears in the documentary that I think we're going to use as our like main jumping off point, which is the Phenomenon, which came out earlier this year. Yeah, Jacques Vallée was like deeply involved in the making of that, and he appears in it, throughout as like a talking head.
Yeah, although it didn't really go into like some of his theories about it so much. Like he didn't really get to voice some of his more interesting stuff, but I think it's good to maybe bring some of that stuff to the table because it is interesting and it combines with some of the other stuff in an interesting way. Yeah,
and he was one of these guys also that I think was definitely involved in kind of like early cybernetics and kind of proto-internet stuff. ARPANET. He wrote a book, I think, called The Network Revolution, which I have a PDF of. I've been meaning to crack it, which I think has some interesting observations from the 70s about like the future of a networked society, and probably has some prescient comments in it, I would think. But we're gonna focus like primarily on the vector of this movie, The Phenomenon, this documentary, which is a product of Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy, which he's been running for several years now, and which came to the attention, of me personally. I'll never forget this, like in the very first batches of Podesta emails that were released just around this time 4 years ago. Like before Spirit Cooking, before Comet Ping Pong, before any of that jazz caught on, people were like sniffing around looking for something, shocking, weird, incriminating. And like the first thing I found that made me like really kind of like do a double take were like all these emails from Tom DeLonge to John Podesta about UFOs. And, I mean, these are like real emails. And it also
seemed like that a lot of the people on his team, even like who knew him well in the Clinton campaign team, didn't quite realize that John Podesta was like a UFO enthusiast to the extreme.
I guess perhaps not, though it's always been a strange current in like the Clinton, the Clinton camp of like those Democrats, is like Bill Clinton has joked before. I think even Hillary joked about I'm going to declassify. She would get to the bottom of it. I'll figure it out. Trump said something like, I'm not a big believer myself, but, I'll look, like, they all say the same thing, which is like, I'll look into it, but then, like, nothing ever comes of it. Yeah, Bill Clinton said, I gotta admit, with a little bit of embarrassment, I did try, but, if they found it, he doesn't even really say that, he's being cheeky, but he doesn't even really say in this one interview that's in the movie, like, whether or not he personally believes that it's real, but says, like, if there was something, I wasn't able to find out about it. And kind of alluded to like, there is kind of a, a deep state, if you will, that he said it wouldn't be the first time that, military people and bureaucrats held something back from the president, which I think is probably true.
Definitely.
But Tom DeLonge, like once he's
ultimately a civilian, so the president's a civilian, so
is he though? He's the commander-in-chief.
I guess not. I guess he's the commander-in-chief. Yeah. But he'll go back to being one. So it's a temporary agreement. You can't, You can't.
Yeah.
You can't tell too much.
So so back in the era of like these Podesta emails, he was basically like he was discussing this thing with John Podesta that he kind of, I guess he had already interviewed John Podesta for a documentary that he was making. Like he says, I think in maybe one of the early emails, let me see here. Yeah, this is 2125, so low in the count. In 2015, he says, "Hi, John. Tom DeLonge here, the one who interviewed you for that special documentary not too long ago. And things are moving with the project. The novels, films, and nonfiction works are blooming and finishing. Just had a preliminary meeting with Spielberg's chief operating officer at DreamWorks. More meetings are now in the books. I would like to bring two very," he puts in quotes, "important people out to meet you in D.C. I think you will find them very interesting, as they were principal leadership relating to our sensitive topic. Both were in charge of most fragile divisions as it relates to classified science and DoD topics. Other words, these are A-level officials. Worth our time, as well as the investment to bring all the way out to you. I just need 2 hours from you. Just looking to have a casual and private conversation in person. Here are some photos from the material I'm using as I meet with studio partners. Best, Tom DeLonge." So, he was already, like, To the Stars already up and running, but, like, he's reaching out to John Podesta, who at the time was a senior advisor to Barack Obama and Hillary's campaign manager. And,
yeah,
there's all kinds of things like this back and forth where
it's so vague, like what To the Stars Academy even does. Like, one of the weirdest things that I dug up about them was that they have this contract with the Army based on like providing some kind of materials that they allegedly possess.
Yes.
Which is like extremely strange. And it has like, the Army, basically, like, yeah, it's funny going.
I see this. Was this from that article from The Drive? That,
yeah, it's from The Drive. That's like, one of the articles attesting to it. TTSA's technology solutions, which leverage developments in material science, space-time metric engineering, quantum physics, beamed energy propulsion, and active camouflage, have the potential to enhance survivability and effectiveness of multiple Army systems. That's from To the Stars Academy's own press release. The Deputy Project Manager for Science Technology and the Vehicle Production Systems Division of GVSC, which is the Army's Ground Vehicle Systems Center, writes, "Our partnership with TTSA serves as an exciting, non-traditional source of novel materials and transformational technologies to enhance our military ground system capabilities. As the Army's Ground Vehicle Systems Center, we look forward to this partnership and the potential technical innovations forthcoming." What? Like, so what? Also, like, they have these materials, like,
So, yeah, I mean, also it's interesting that this article mentions that the people in the Ground Vehicle Survivability and Protection, the GVSP program, are listed as the principal investigators on the Army side, and TTSA's principal investigator is Luis Elizondo, who's the organization's director of global security and special programs. It does say here, and we'll probably get to this later, like Elizondo has claimed in the past to have been in charge of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, which had the ostensible mission of exploring various UAP sightings and was situated for a period under the Office of the Secretary of Defense. But more recent reports had called into question his precise relationship with that program, and we found a bunch of other stuff too. He's basically this guy, Luis Elizondo, claimed to be a part of this like secret Pentagon program, ATIP, that was set up partly at the urging of Senator Harry Reid, who appears in the Phenomenon documentary.
He got like Daniel Inouye and like one other guy to like sort of sneak in this like weird program. And that was the one the New York Times, like Luis Elizondo was the main sort of subject and the main point person for that New York Times article that came out in 2019 that caused like a big stir. It was like, what? Like UFOs are real? Like, and everyone's like, wow, 2019 cannot get crazier. Like there's aliens now, you know.
I remember that.
2019 be over already? You know, like how yeah, exactly.
How good we had it.
It was like, can 2019 get any crazier? Like so.
No, that's a really important point. Is like this To the Stars Academy, and by Tom DeLonge's own admission, And like his pitch that he was giving to Podesta and others was that he was going to be kind of like the PR campaign for UFO disclosure and bring it out in like a real and entertaining and like, you know, classy way that can finally settle the question that like UFOs are in fact real, and give a platform for certain, you know, government people that have worked on these things to like come out and like share a certain amount of information, because Tom DeLonge is, you know, very clear from the get-go that he says his pitch to like the military guys was like, look, like what you did 70 years ago was awesome, and if I was in your position, like I would have done the same thing. I would have kept it secret too, because I think you guys, like, I believe in you guys, and like I think the U.S. military, you know, you guys are like the smartest people in the world, and but you know, all this, you know, nobody knows because, you know, you have to keep it secret. So all these crazy conspiracies come about, you know, that are saying, you know, all kinds of bad things about you guys, but like I want to make sure that like you're celebrated and the American people like appreciate what the Pentagon has done. Like reverse engineer UFO technology. And I guess they ostensibly responded well to that.
Yeah, it's all very strange. And, like, the idea that they have, like, these... Like, it's just, like, so bizarre that, like, if he's all about disclosure, like, and you presumably have, like, something in the way of these, like, quote-unquote materials... Like, why don't you do, like, a Thomas Edison style, like, open expo, or, like, set up a camera, you know, like, use your money that you have from being able to like, buy, like, a nice camera, or, like, you know, big, I mean, now we have COVID, but whatever, you know, have some kind of event or whatever, and just demonstrate the, like, super, you know, the special or sort of incomprehensible properties of these materials to the world, and be like, these come from UFOs, like... You know, just disclose it. Like, I don't get it. Like, they're always like, disclosure is a process and it has begun. But that is inherently sus to me. Like,
it is. Well, it sounds a lot like QAnon. Like, it's coming and I think that
the plan.
QAnon probably, whoever, you know, was fully behind it was probably like aware of the dissemination of UFO conspiracy discourse on the internet, and you know, and like the popularity of like LMAO discourse on 4chan, you know, for many years. And that kind of trickle process of like, we're gonna like put out this little thing, but it's not something that you can be proved, but we're still in the fight. There's things going on. There's white hats. There's black hats behind the scenes. They're all fighting. Like, and then even UFOs. I remember kind of having a little fun like years and years ago, maybe around like 2014, of like finding some of these more old school kind of like UFO kind of centric conspiracy websites that had all of these like very imaginative but obviously kind of LARPy narratives about. I remember one in particular was about how, like, you know, obviously George H.W. Bush was in league with probably the Reptoids, I think. You know, the Draco. Yes. And he was like blackmailing Obama with his real birth certificate or something, and
I remember this.
He was going to keep it secret as long as Obama like did his bidding, but it was really all about like the alien agenda. And then there were like white hats that were like working with a benevolent ET race, and it just mapped onto whatever the political kind of you know, issues were of the day, but you could spin this almost fan fiction in between the margins and create this whole cosmology. And that's something that I think we saw kind of like fall by the wayside a little bit in the last like 5 years.
There's not so much like, we were talking about this a little bit in the Giants episode, you know, like that sort of conspiracy theory, like around like, oh, there's all these giants or something. Like, it's just a rare commodity like nowadays. Like, I remember we should definitely do our own like full episode about like DUMBs, like deep underground military bases. But one of my favorite stories is the Phil Schneider story of like getting blasted by like a energy beam from like a Gray's belly button or whatever, you know, and like a Delta Force guy like jumping in and being like, go!
Oh yeah, Phil Schneider, yeah, exactly, like the Delta Force team that was extracting him from the underground base.
So yeah, we should do our own episode, but yeah, like it's a different world. And another aspect of it is I feel like the whole like idea of like the heroization of, this is maybe a through line in a lot of our episodes, but like the transformation of conspiracy discourse, there is a parallel to Q in a way, because like, you know, the military is all of a sudden, like, heroic. Like, and even in the age of the X-Files, like, you know, they were all bad guys. You know, like, everyone knew that, like, you know, I mean, maybe, like, Mulder and Scully, they were in the FBI, like, but the mechanism of the FBI was still kind of bad, and it was compromised and controlled by, like, the U.S. government that was, like,
the deep state
evil.
was, like, in control.
But, yeah, they were evil, and, like, they were up to no good, and, like, they were trying to keep people in the dark, but, like, now all of a sudden they're, like, heroes, like, in the, like, patriots, you know, like, who are trying to accomplish disclosure, like, what the fuck, like, yeah, it's sus as hell.
It's the level of credulity that somebody like Tom DeLonge has. And, I mean, watching his interviews and stuff, it's, you know, I don't know, so many things he says are just kind of, like, on their face, kind of like, dude, really? In terms of, like, his willingness to trust these people and being wowed by them. And you really are kind of teetering on, like, is this guy just very gullible and suggestible?
Yeah. One of the funniest things that he said was, like, you know, like, what is he bringing? I think it was in the show that they gave to the Stars Academy on History Channel, which, of course, is, like, you know, really more the UFO channel at this point. Like, you know, they have, like, a whole show. Yeah, like, most of their content. I mean, well, I don't understand what this would have to do with history. I guess, like, you know, our idea of American history would have to be revised if, like, you know, there was evidence that the government had contact with aliens, but whatever. Anyway, the point is that, like, this show, as, you know, it doesn't really have anything to do with history, and I remember them asking, like, Tom DeLonge, you know, like, what do you bring, or Tom DeLonge, what do you bring to the table? You know, you have all these, like, big government people or whatever, and, you know, who are involved, like, people who used to work at the highest echelons of, like, these different intel agencies, or, like, you know, for the Department of Defense or whatever, and they're like, you know, what do you bring? And he's like, communication, you know, I know how to, like, communicate with the masses, you know, I'm a rock star, or whatever. It's like, all right, yeah, okay, buddy, like, you know,
well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like nobody else thought about the idea. There already was, just as you said, like on the History Channel, that like greatly predated the To the Stars Academy, where like every other show on the History Channel circa like 2011 was basically ancient aliens, UFOs. I remember there was like a big mermaid special back in like 2012.
Yeah, mermaids
that was like
found.
It
was
was funny.
Animal Planet? Yeah,
I forget. Yeah, I forget which one it was. I remember that it kind of it like presented itself as real, but
people got tricked by it because it was like a mockumentary. It was like,
exactly,
you know,
it was a mockumentary. It was very but people were. I remember people kind of being like, "Yo, you ever watched Ancient Aliens?" Like people were kind of watching that stuff, and there was kind of I think 2012 is the last kind of peak of popularity in sort of UFO-y adjacent stuff. And maybe there's a lot of reasons why that was in, like, you know, 2012. But I think there was, I think the History Channel had a lot to do with it. So the idea that, like, Tom DeLonge would be, like, the first guy to try to, like, monetize the culture around UFO stuff is a little bit, like, okay, I mean...
There's a weird shift happening now, though, where, like, even the term UFO itself, like, we're being sort of, like, encouraged to now say, like, UAP...
Yeah.
Like unidentified aerial phenomenon, like it's being kind of like rebranded. It all started with that, like, you know, the New York Times article. I guess like
which
I guess
was connected to this whole. It was connected to this whole network, and I think in that they interviewed people from the To the Stars Academy. So like he's definitely. I mean. I'll give him credit where credit's due. He is kind of the public clearinghouse, kind of go-to organization now to sort of publicize. I mean, certainly the military seems to be comfortable with dumping these classified videos from, you know, fighter jets like into the lap of To the Stars Academy. The New York Times feels comfortable going to them to talk about it and put these people out there as like experts. So you immediately have to wonder, like, like what's going on here?
There was like a 2017 article called "Glowing Auras and Black Money: The Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program" that I guess really launched all this. And there was another one in 2019, which I guess you mentioned, which was about sort of the Navy pilots and the UFO. So they've been doing a fair amount of reporting on this. But I found this article from The Intercept by Keith Clore, which goes into, like, Louis Elizondo, who is in, like, he's a huge figure in Unidentified, the show about the Stars Academy. And this goes into kind of his connections and sort of, like, the discrepancies between, like, you know, what The Intercept could discover and what the New York Times reported. So he writes, it's a story that launched Luis Elizondo into the public eye. The article that, quote, shocked the world, the narrator of Unidentified, their History Channel show, declares, before continuing, a clandestine U.S. government program had been investigating UFOs. For 8 years, the secret program was run by this man, Luis Elizondo. The camera then pans to a visual of the former military intelligence case officer in a darkened house peering out warily through half-drawn window shades. It's an odd scene. Is Elizondo on the lookout for aliens or a bad guy from his old spook life? Either way, the History Channel show, which premiered on Friday and is being promoted as groundbreaking nonfiction, goes on to follow Elizondo as he reinvestigates strange UFO incidents he says he learned of when he was at the Pentagon running the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program known as AATIP. ATIP. ATIP, I don't know. It's as if Agent
ATIP,
Mulder had handed off his X-Files to another paranoid government agent, this one with a pug face and a billy goat beard. In the screener I saw, wow, body shaming? Like, come on. Anyway, in the screener I saw for Unidentified, the narrator says that Elizondo quit the Pentagon because he was, quote, frustrated by what he says was a cover-up. But you know what? I did watch Unidentified, and I remember very clearly him saying a very suspicious quote, which, I mean, you could read in an innocuous way, but he said something like, yeah, he said, I left the Department of Defense because of my loyalty to the department, you know, not because of my disloyalty.
Yes.
So it was like, I watched the first episode of it, and that was the same quote that he said. Anyway, so, yes, AATIP existed, and it did pursue research and investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena, Pentagon spokesperson Christopher Sherwood told me. However, he added, Mr. Elizondo had no responsibilities with regard to the AATIP program while he worked in OUSDI, the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, up until the time he resigned, effective October 4th, 2017. That directly contradicts an email sent by a spokesperson for To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, a UFO research and entertainment company that Elizondo joined after he left the Defense Department. I love how it's like also like arts and like entertainment. So the email was sent over a year ago by Carrie DeLonge, public relations representative for To the Stars, to John Greenwald, no relation, a UFO researcher who runs an online archive of Freedom of Information Act obtained government documents on a website called the Black Vault. At the time, Greenwald had become frustrated at the lack of tangible information about ATIP and Elizondo's role. Additionally, Elizondo had spurned Greenwald's interview requests. Greenwald told me that he had asked DeLonge specifically where Elizondo worked within the Department of Defense when he ran AATIP, or ATIP. Hi, John. Thanks for reaching out, DeLonge wrote. The program was initially run out of the Defense Intelligence Agency, but when Louis took it over in 2010 as director, he ran it out of the Office for the Secretary of Defense under the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Hope that clarifies. I tried contacting Elizondo multiple times via email and his cell phone. He has not responded. Anyway, so basically it does not appear that he actually worked for the organization that he represents himself as having responsibilities to do with, or actually having led, which is extremely bizarre.
Although it does verify that he was a Pentagon employee, and I think elsewhere in the article it does say, like, basically they ask him, I guess he self-described himself once as a career spy, and he also said that they asked him if he was still working as a government contractor at the time of this article, and he said yes, but like it has nothing to do with let's see. He says this guy the Pentagon, debunked this, and in the screener it says Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, who we'll get to shortly. These guys still have security clearances, still have networks in Washington, still are in the business, if you will.
Yeah, it does.
That last part sounds like a cryptic reference to contract work they might be doing for a U.S. intelligence agency or some other government entity. Elizondo confirmed to me earlier this year that he is, in fact, working as a government contractor, quote, but it's not what you think it is, he said. Mellon did not respond to my request for comment. Yeah, I mean, so he's still working as a government contractor. These guys have probably the most kind of pro-government posture of, like, any UFO conspiracy theorists ever, right?
Even in his 2017 resignation letter to then Defense Secretary James Mattis, which bears the apparent seal of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, Elizondo alludes to internal opposition at the Pentagon to investigate UFOs that he wrote had menaced Navy pilots and posed an existential threat to our national security. So he was leaving because the Pentagon wasn't taking that threat seriously, contrary to his statement that he had great loyalty. But so definitely very pro defense. To the Stars Academy is apparently let's make a contract with the Army to help develop these important tools. I feel like that is contrary to everything that UFO conspiracies used to stand for. The idea of this disclosure organization being let's make a contract to really if I'm going to standard narrative, the Army would be the people you'd steal the materials from, and they would be keeping them in a box in a hangar somewhere. Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't be here you go, guys. Hey
Mom, there's something in the back room. Hope it's not the creatures from above. You used to read me stories as if my dreams were boring. We all know conspiracies are dumb. What if people knew that these were real? I leave my closet door open all night. I know the CIA would say what you hear is all hearsay. Wish someone would tell me what was right. All night long, and there's something very wrong, and I know it must be late. Been gone since yesterday. I'm not like you guys. I'm not like you. I am still a skeptic, yes, you know me. Been best friends and will be till we die. I got an injection of fear from the abduction. My best friend thinks I'm just telling lies. Alright, all night long, and there's something very wrong.
It definitely is a shift now that that is kind of very compatible for the era of we need a coalition of brave CIA officers and military generals to get rid of Trump, or something like that. Like you hear people saying things that would sound kind of shocking 10 or 15 years ago about we need to invest our faith in the Pentagon, basically, and our intelligence agencies, and we somewhere along the way, so many people ended up becoming not suspicious of them. And actually,
this is a sus detail just from the end of that article. Elizondo retired as an official at the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. A public records search also reveals a series of home addresses for Elizondo over the last 2 decades that are close to intelligence facilities in Toa Baja, Puerto Rico, the site of an unacknowledged government surveillance program called Echelon, and in Grovetown, Georgia. Being from Georgia, I can assure you there is no reason anyone in their right mind would live in Grovetown unless they are working at Fort Gordon, home of the Army's principal signals intelligence units and school, Tim McMillan, who, like Greenwald, has a long-time interest in UFOs and has come to doubt Elizondo's involvement with any government UFO program. In 2017, when Elizondo outed himself to the Times, he was portrayed as a reluctant whistleblower and a little paranoid. The 3 reporters who shared bylines in the story, including freelancer Leslie Keene, who wrote in 2016 that she was privileged to welcome Chris Mellon into the UFO organization to which she belonged, met Elizondo in a nondescript Washington hotel where he sat with his back to the wall, keeping an eye on the door. So anyway, that dude doubts that he definitely has some intelligence connections. He certainly did work for the Department of Defense, but what is his actual job and what is its relation to UFOs? It's certainly not exactly what he's conveyed it to be.
No,
Obviously,
it's not.
He's involved in UFO research and UFO stuff, but like, you know, he's not being forthright about his career.
Of course. And I think that's an important thing to dwell upon, because, like, there was a previous movie that came out, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, that was called Mirage Men.
Yeah.
And the very...
Is it really
I mean,
7 years ago? It seems so long.
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like it was 2013. But... and we almost did the episode based on Mirage Men, but since it was like a long time ago, we'll just talk about it. And
we wanted to do something a little broader, but it was still relevant to that movie, because it is a great movie, and like it deals with like some of these like really important themes of like the, you know, uncertainty and the deception involved in like some of this stuff, like yeah.
It's certainly the number one movie if you're interested in sort of the notion that the UFO culture itself is some kind of psyop that is being sort of fostered and controlled and managed by the U.S. military itself, which is basically, it presents a real life cases of that happening in the movie with the Air Force intelligence officer Richard Doty, who basically started feeding... And who knows why, you know, he felt comfortable to talk on camera for this documentary, or why the Air Force sort of was okay with him doing it. He didn't seem to be particularly like on the outs with the Air Force when they profiled him in Mirage Men. But he basically, I forget the name of the ufologist who thought he saw UFOs at, I think it was a base in maybe New Mexico in the 1980s. And he took some video of it, and I think it was actually of some kind of classified, you know, airplane project that, you know, they were test flying, and he went to this guy and claimed to be like an insider and was like, I have been authorized to give you information. Very similar to Tom DeLonge's situation, where these like generals approach him out of the blue and act very dramatic and are like, you need to shut the fuck up and listen to what I have to say. Keep your eyes on the sky. Like stuff like that. Like he's got his 1 stars these and 2 giants. Stars. And so basically, like, I mean, he basically like fed this guy for years. He fed him kind of like doctored Air Force documents and maybe like videos and things like that. And this guy went on to become like a pretty big, and I think even, you know, then other even bigger ufologists kind of adopted this guy's like story and made it a central part. I forget the name of the guy whose reputation was like ruined by this, because eventually, I think in the 90s, the guy who had been approached by Richard Doty disclosed that he had been getting information from the Air Force, and that like some of it was false, and I think a lot of people
made up some kind of really interesting stuff about like, you know, missions on other planets or whatever. Like, I forget exactly what it was called, but yeah, like I don't know, like it was a lot of like very lofty stuff.
A lot of lore, that got disseminated throughout the community, and then when it was exposed that this guy was like getting it from an Air Force intelligence officer, I guess people still had enough of a critical faculties back then to go, no, like, you know, this is still the X-Files era. So I think he drove that guy to like have like a mental breakdown. The original guy he like approached and like ruined his life completely. And even though that movie does play a little coy with it, talks to some other people who claim that like, no, I actually saw like the body of an alien, and they leave it on. Well, at
the end, Richard Doty kind of says, that's interesting, because like at the end, that's like what's interesting about it. Like it's ambiguous in the end, like because Richard Doty, I mean, again, he's someone who's like been established in the movie as like supremely dishonest and basically a disinfo agent who drove this guy insane with like hoaxing a lot of stuff. Related to UFOs, but he says, like, you know, when I was first brought on to do this work for the government, they showed me, like, a video of an alien, and they said, you know, this is real, like, you know, everything else is fake, this is real. So, like, you know, is he making up that story?
Well, exactly.
Or they lying to him?
Was he psyoped?
Yeah, was he psyoped? Or, you know, did that really happen? You know, like, So, it's, like, there's, like, levels upon levels, and, that's, like, what I think makes that like such a great movie, is like the mysteriousness of like the whole thing, and like the whole like this idea I feel like is I wish I could find I'll look for it maybe later, but this whole idea of like the deception, or that there's more to UFOs than meets the eye even to like UFO researchers was something that like even Jacques Vallée, who apparently now has, I mean, he not only has a sus background, like with his connection with ARPANET and all that stuff, but has also some connections with the creators of this movie, The Phenomenon, and to the Stars Academy. I mean, one of the real things that got me about this documentary was the first time I heard about it in a clip from Tucker, where
Tucker had Chris Mellon on his show like a little over a month ago.
And he was like, if it weren't an election year, we would do a whole week, we do a whole hour on it, maybe even a whole week. It's that important. And it's like, what? Like, okay, like...
Tucker is, I have to say, Tucker is such a fucking deadhead.
I hate Tucker.
It totally links up. His love of the Grateful Dead and his love of UFOs, they totally sync.
Anyway, so, he's deep into it. And, so that's where I first heard about the documentary. But Jacques Vallée is featured very heavily in this. And he was someone who, really had in the past gone into various levels of, like, this idea of there being some kind of, like, deception involved. One of the most interesting things he talked about in his book, Passport to Magonia, and the title of the book is a reference to kind of this mystical land where, like, weather witches were said to go, like, in the clouds. Like, there's a little bit of a Salem crossover here, but, we can't go too deeply into it now. Maybe in the future. But, a witchcraft crossover here. But, anyway, so he goes into something that John Keel, the Mothman Prophecies guy, actually kind of picked up on from him and also talked about, which is this whole phenomenon of, like, this airship flap that happened in 1897, where, like, a bunch of people saw all these, like, bizarre airships flying over the American Midwest. And they sort of looked like, it was interesting because their appearance, was consistent with what people at the time would have imagined, like, a flying machine to look like. He cites some interesting, little stories that I think are worth reading. So, all the operators who engaged in discussion with human witnesses were indistinguishable from the average American population at the time. This, for instance, is the experience related by Captain James Hooton, described in the Arkansas Gazette as the well-known Iron Mountain Railroad conductor. I had gone down to Texarkana to bring back a special, and knowing that I would have some 8 to 10 hours to spend in Texarkana, I went to Homan, Arkansas, to do a little hunting. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I reached that place. The sport was good, and before I knew it, it was after 6 o'clock when I started to make my way back to the railroad station. As I was tramping through the bush, my attention was attracted by a familiar sound, a sound for all the world like the working of air pump on a locomotive. I went at once in the direction of the sound, and there in the open space of some 5 or 6 acres, I saw the object making the noise. To say that I was astonished would but feebly express my feelings. I decided at once that this was the famous airship seen by so many people around in the country. There was a medium-sized looking man aboard, and I noticed that he was wearing smoked glasses. He was tinkering around what seemed to be the back end of the ship, and as I approached, I was too dumbfounded to speak. He looked at me in surprise and said, "Good day, sir, good day," I asked. "Is this the airship?" And he replied, "Yes, sir," whereupon 3 or 4 other men came out of what was apparently the keel of the ship. A close examination showed the keel was divided into 2 parts, terminating in front like the sharp edge of a knife-like edge, while the side of the ship bulged gradually towards the middle, then receded. "I beg your pardon, sir," I said. He says there were 3 large wheels upon each side made of some bending metal and arranged so that they became concave as they moved forward. "I beg your pardon, sir," I said. "The noise sounds a great deal like a Westinghouse air brake." "Perhaps it does, my friend. We are using condensed air in airplanes, but you will know more later on." Already, sir," someone called out when the party all disappeared below. I observed that just in front of the wheel, each wheel, a 2-inch tube began to spurt air onto the wheels, and they commenced revolving. The ship gradually rose with a hissing sound. The airplanes suddenly sprang forward, turning their sharp ends skyward, and then the rudders at the end of the ship began to veer to one side, and the wheels revolved so fast that they could scarcely see the blades. In less time than it takes to tell you, the ship had gone out of sight. So that's like a typical description of it. So you can see how that's like very like steampunk, like
Yeah,
very
I was just gonna say,
19th
like,
century.
is this literally where steampunk came from?
Well,
because,
steampunk,
like,
yeah. Well,
I'm just thinking of the guy with the goggles, like, "Hello, sir, welcome to my flying ship."
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, steampunk is based on like, you know, old time, like 19th century ideas of what the future would be like. And so like this thing that was encountered, you know, if you take it at face value and like not maybe a lie or whatever, then it was consistent with like, you know, the time. Like, so this is what Vallée interprets, you know, that's his gloss on all this stuff. What does it all mean? Is it reasonable to draw a parallel between religious apparitions, the fairy faith, the reports of dwarf-like beings with supernatural powers, the airship tales in the United States in the last century, and the present stories of UFO landings? I would strongly argue that it is, for one simple reason. The mechanisms that have generated these various beliefs are identical. Their human context and their effect on humans are constant, and it is my conclusion that the observation of this very deep mechanism is a crucial one. It has little to do with the problem of knowing whether UFOs are physical objects or not. Attempting to understand the meaning, the purpose of the so-called flying saucers, as so many people are doing today, is just as futile as was the pursuit of the fairies, if one makes the mistake of confusing appearance and reality. The phenomenon has stable, invariant features, some of which we have tried to identify and label clearly, but we have also had to note carefully the chameleon-like character of the secondary attributes of the sightings. The shapes of the objects, the appearance of their occupants, their reported statements vary as a function of the cultural environment into which they are projected. The airship stories are especially relevant in this connection, as we have seen a good number of bearded characters alighted in the Midwest and elsewhere in 1897, always doing that, to request water from a well, bluestones, or other similar things. The stories they told were believable, if somewhat astounding, to American farmers of the time. The airship itself corresponded to the popular concept of an elaborate flying machine. It had wheels, turbines, wings, powerful lights. There is only one detail not yet dealt with. The fact that the airship, though it was believable to the witnesses of 1897, is no longer credible to us. We know very well that the device as described could not possibly fly, unless its outside appearance was designed to deceive potential witnesses. But if so, why? And what was it? What was its purpose? Perhaps the airship, like the fairy tricks, the flying saucers, was a lie, so well engineered that its image in human consciousness could sink very deep indeed and then be forgotten, as UFO landings are forgotten, as the appearance of supernatural beings in the Middle Ages are forgotten. But then, are they really forgotten? Human actions are based on imagination, belief, and faith, not an objective observation, as military and political experts know well. Even science, which claims its methods and theories are rationally developed, is really shaped by emotion and fancy, or by fear. And to control human imagination is to shape man's collective destiny, provided the source of this control is not identifiable by the public. And indeed, it is one of the objectives of any government's policies to prepare the public for unavoidable changes or to stimulate its activity in some desirable direction. Thus, the Soviets have skillfully employed the services of science fiction writers to supply the emotional support of their space effort among the young people. In the Western world, control over our imaginations is more diffuse. Okay.
Yeah,
and many sources compete for it. But it is significant that intelligence agencies and advertising companies alike should be so highly interested in folklore. Not only are Batman and the Jolly Green Giant instances of interesting mentions. Anyway, are instances of experiments in this direction. The Vietnam War has seen similar appeals to public imagination through the use of local superstition. Shout out Colonel Michael Aquino and Operation Wandering Soul. Yes. Recent discussions in Congress regarding the advisability of military experimentation with witchcraft in Black Africa is also a case in point. We're going to do an episode of that.
That is a put a big bookmark on that
I put that down. I actually looked up the discussion in Congress that he mentions. I took a note of that for the future. But anyway,
I got some bold theories around that. But
but anyway, so you can see how like even though he kind of is suggesting he's going kind of both ways with it and saying that is it a government trick? Is it a trick by the aliens? Like this whole idea of the ultra-terrestrials, as John Keel would call them. This whole idea of deception being involved and what's experienced and the difference between that. It's kind of a screen, or sometimes in UFO accounts or alien abduction accounts, there's this whole idea of screen memories, that you remember something, but then under hypnosis or whatever, or just through the natural progress of time, that screen starts to break down, or there's aspects of it that don't really quite make sense. And then the contactee or whatever realizes oh wait, this was something that was placed here to cover up, reality. But, is the reality they encounter just another kind of screen, in this world of screens that we now inhabit? But, he also, just, to round this out, he also actually mentioned in his, in the Phenomenon movie, one of the big things that he mentioned was this memo called, he called it the Pentacle Memo, which is a very provocative name. A pentacle, of course, being like, like kind of a pentagram of which is sign, it's like specifically magical is a pentacle, more so than just a pentagram, which could just be the shape. But anyway, so he called, and of course he was interested in these things and folklore and whatnot. But anyway, so he called it the Pentacle Memo, although it was later revealed that the memo was written by this guy Howard Clinton Cross, or also known as just H.C. Cross, who worked for the Battelle Memorial Institute and was like a dude who studied like exotic metallurgy. And he actually wrote, I found some papers by him that were just straight up about the kind of stuff that, going back to the metals thing, he was super into metallurgy and especially the military applications of metals, particularly in aeronautics. So, anyway, but this is the letter that he wrote, which is very interesting. So he wrote it to Miles E. Goal, who, we can go into a little bit later, who he was. But, people haven't been able to dig up too much for him, but he was, an early kingpin at Wright Field and first worked as head of fire control for the armament lab during the war. Later, he was in T2 and controlled access to the Special Situation Room. Very little else is known about him, but he did have great connections at Wright Field and the Pentagon. He's a mysterious figure. But anyway, so it's directed to him from Howard C. Cross. This letter concerns a preliminary recommendation to the ATIC on future methods of handling the problem of unidentified aerial objects. This recommendation is based on our experience to date in analyzing several thousands of reports on the subject. So an important point that, Jacques Vallée and, the creators of the documentary make is that this, proves that before Project Blue Book, before all this stuff, there were efforts to analyze all these reports that, aren't necessarily, known about in the same way Blue Book is. Anyway, so we regard the recommendation as preliminary because our analysis is not yet complete, and we are not able to document it where we feel it should be supported by facts from the analysis. We are making this recommendation prematurely because of a CIA-sponsored meeting of a scientific panel meeting in Washington, D.C., January 14th, 15th, and 16th, 1953, to consider the problem of flying saucers. The date of this letter is itself, January 9th, 1953. The CIA-sponsored meeting is being held subsequent to a meeting of CIA, ATIC, and our representatives held at ATIC on December 12th, 1952. At the December 12th meeting, our representatives strongly recommended that a scientific panel not be set up until the results of our analysis of the sighting reports collected by the ATIC were available. Since the meeting of the panel is now definitely scheduled, we feel that agreement between Project Stork, a mysterious thing, and the ATIC should be reached as to what can and what cannot be discussed at the meeting in Washington on January 14th to 16th concerning our preliminary recommendations to ATIC. So that's interesting. Experience to date on our study... experience to date on our study of unidentified flying objects shows that there is a distinct lack of reliable data with which to work. Even the best documented reports are frequently lacking in critical information that makes it impossible to arrive at a possible identification, i.e., even in a well-documented report, there is always an element of doubt about the data, either because the observer had no means of getting the required data or was not prepared to utilize the means at his disposal. Therefore, we recommend that a controlled experiment be set up by which reliable physical data can be obtained. A tentative preliminary plan by which the experiment could be designed and carried out is discussed in the following paragraphs. Based on our experience so far, it is expected that certain conclusions will be reached as a result of our analysis, which will make obvious the need for an effort to obtain reliable data from competent observers using there's an unreadable part, necessary equipment. Until more reliable data are available, no positive answers to the problem will be possible. We expect that our analysis will show that certain areas in the United States have had an abnormally high number of reported incidents of unidentified flying objects. Assuming that from our analysis, several definite areas productive of reports can be selected, we recommend that one or two of these areas be set up as experimental areas. This area or areas should have observation posts with complete visual skywatch, with radar and photographic coverage, plus all other instruments necessary or helpful in obtaining positive and reliable data on everything in the air over the area. A very complete record of the weather should also be kept during the time of the experiment. Coverage should be so complete that any object in the air, etc., could be recorded. All balloon releases or known balloon paths, aircraft flights, and flights of rockets in the test area should be known to those in charge of the experiment. This is a key sentence. Many different types of aerial activity should be secretly and purposefully scheduled within the area.
Ooh.
Okay. Yeah, so basically, like, planning to put, like, you know, as part
like
of this,
like a control group, if you will.
Yeah, they wanted to do... Yeah, now who knows what the different types of aerial activity were.
Yeah.
We recognize this proposed experiment would amount to a large-scale military maneuver or operation, and that it would require extensive preparation and fine coordination, plus maximum security. Although it would be a major operation and expensive, there are many extra benefits to be derived besides the data on unidentified aerial objects. The question of just what would be accomplished by the proposed experiment occurs. Just how could the problem of these unidentified objects be solved? From this test area, during the time of the experiment, it can be assumed that there would be a steady flow of reports from ordinary civilian observers, in addition to those by military or other official observers. It should be possible by such a controlled experiment to prove the identity of all objects reported, or to determine positively that there were objects present of unknown identity. Any hoaxes under a setup should, such as this, could almost certainly be exposed, perhaps not publicly, but at least to the military. In addition, by having resulting data from the controlled experiments, reports for the last 5 years could be reevaluated in light of similar but positive information. This should make possible reasonably certain conclusions concerning the importance of the problem of flying saucers, quote-unquote flying saucers. Results of an experiment such as described could assist the Air Force to determine how much attention to pay to future situations when, as in the past summer, there were thousands of sightings reported. In the future, then, the Air Force should be able to make positive statements, reassuring to the public to the effect that everything is well under control.
Wow.
Very true. Yours, yeah. So
I mean, that's is that referring to what was shown in the documentary where there was repeated like airspace violations in Washington D.C. I think in 1952
there's like
or
UFOs
53?
interfering with nuclear weapons. There was an idea.
Yeah.
So like, you know, we assume this document is real. Like I think like, you know, it has passed muster with the same people who like, you know, the famous Majestic 12 documents, like which are now considered to be fake. Like you know. By the same evaluation, it's been determined. And, like, the original identity of this person was concealed and then did come to light. And this guy was a real person who, like, it's very interesting to me that, like, he was a metallurgist and then suddenly, like, you know, was really big, like a big UFO figure. Like, it's so bizarre, like, you know, was writing, like, from this sort of secret program. It's, you know, and...
It definitely leaves open the door as well for a kind of, like, various kind of psyop development.
Exactly. It seems like they were playing the psyop people, but also the psyop was part of a plan to kind of, like, see about what was really going on and then, like, control it. Like, or at least control the narrative around it.
And I guess maybe you could leave the door open for a kind of the scientific experimental aspect of seeing, like, I guess what he's saying kind of out front there is that by doing this, we're going to be able to collect all kinds of sensory data that we can then compare to past and future sightings to, like, suss out whether or not this is kind of a terrestrial object, something that we could create, but then of course it kind of leaves the door open a little bit to, like, mimic
for sure.
UFOs.
Basically he was saying, like, the control experiment is going to be, like, when we light off all these aircraft, like, in this area where we have total, like, aerial monitoring and control, like, probably, like, a bunch of, like, these fools are going to say, like, oh my god, a UFO, and then if there are no, like, you know, then we'll know everything in the air, and if none of them are real UFOs that we don't know about, then, like, that will prove that these UFO waves are something to be concerned about, and if not, then no. But, so that's, like, kind of what he's saying out front. But, of course, that also involves implicitly, like, psyoping everybody. And, being able to then, like, induce UFO waves.
I mean...
You know, which is basically the entire, like, goal of the experiment.
Yeah, and I would love to know, like, if there were any famous sightings of UFOs that were, like, one of these experiments. And then if it was, then we certainly never found out about it. You know, they didn't announce, like, hey, guys, we were just doing an experiment. Those weren't real.
Well, that's kind of their story about Roswell now, that, like, you know, it was some kind of, like, secret weather balloon that they were, like, testing.
Soviet nuclear tests or something like that.
in the phenomenon, they did say that, like, that dude, that famous, picture of that dude posing with, like, the debris, which doesn't look very impressive when you see it, he was, like, told to pose with some, like, janky, like, balloon foil. And, like, the actual metamaterials, I guess, now are in, I don't know, the possession of Tom DeLonge, I don't know. But, they weren't actually, but, yeah, that was what they went with in that documentary anyway.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about Christopher Mellon a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he figures very prominently in this story, and is somebody that, not only he does seem to have some kind of, legit, like, Pentagon government credentials, but is also obviously was born into the immensely powerful and wealthy Mellon family from Pittsburgh.
Yes. Right.
And, yeah.
Wealthy. Yeah, just one of the many, like, super rich figures that the phenomenon kind of painted heroically, just like Lawrence Rockefeller.
Yeah, and maybe we can touch on him a little bit shortly, because he's somebody that has been, like, a huge booster of, like, new agey ufology kind of phenomena, and has been, like, a big booster, and honestly the Mellon family as well, through Chris Mellon's relative, Billy Mellon Hitchcock, who owned, I believe, he and his sister Peggy Hitchcock, and they basically, had this Millbrook estate in upstate New York that they basically gave to Timothy Leary in 1963, and helped him found his and Richard Alpert / Ram Dass's International Federation for Internal Freedom, or IF. And they basically let, like, Timothy Leary, like, have the run of the place for, like, several years, and he had, like, Alan Watts and R.D. Laing and Allen Ginsberg and all these other people, that Ken Casey and the Merry Pranksters. It was almost like whatever was going on with, like, MK-LSD research in Palo Alto, this is like MK East, and it was done by the direct sponsoring of the very overall, like, right-wing Mellon family, who for some reason developed this hippy-dippy interest in psychedelics and, like, expanded consciousness and UFO. And so I remember a couple years ago when the To the Stars thing started, like, rolling out and getting, like, written about in the New York Times, like, seeing this name Christopher Mellon pop up and thinking, like, hold up, like, wait a minute, there's a Mellon involved. And then I look at this guy's resume, and basically he is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, and later for Security and Information Operations, and was also formerly the Staff Director on the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And when he did work on Capitol Hill, the person he was working for was none other than Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Senator John D. Rockefeller IV.
Nice.
So, just keeping these families.
And conservationist.
Yeah.
Great.
The Rockefeller-Mellon alliance. Thank God.
Yes, the Rockefeller. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess they were in deep with a lot. I mean, we have Carnegie Mellon, you know. They have,
Carnegie Mellon, huge science, huge
Yeah.
STEM place, and obviously, they started with the Mellon Bank, and then I think became the controllers of Gulf Oil, and then moved into all kinds of other things, and they're still. They're still big today. I mean, I think the other character of this generation of Mellons, who I think maybe you would not be super surprised to see where he popped up. I'm trying to find the Mellon who died several years ago. Matthew Mellon, that's right. And if you look it up, Matthew Mellon, who died in 2018, was actually became a billionaire investing in Bitcoin, and but he had a very troubled life. He had very big, like, Hunter Biden vibes with Matthew Mellon. He was a little bit of except rather than crack cocaine, I think his drug of choice is like OxyContin and opiates. And, had a lot of business ventures that basically, didn't work out. Apparently he was spending at one point $100,000 a month on OxyContin. Basically was dating the daughter of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Kick Kennedy, for a while. Also kind of like a weird kind of Hunter Biden kind of vibe. Then died in Cancun, Mexico, where he had traveled to check into something called the Clear Sky Recovery Clinic, which was an ibogaine clinic. Ibogaine is another psychedelic drug, kind of like mescaline, and there are these clinics for rich people to go down to Mexico and take ibogaine to kick their opiate addictions. And interesting, he was reported to have died in a hotel room in Cancun before arrival at the clinic, suffering a fatal heart attack after taking ayahuasca. So another,
wow, okay.
He was the founder of Jimmy Choo also. So that was kind of a weird thing.
That's very weird.
Okay. And then his he invested in Ripple. Actually, he made $1 billion investing in the Ripple cryptocurrency. But actually, and this is around the time that it was after Bitcoin mooned in 2017 and 2018 that made him kind of a legitimate billionaire off of that. And I believe his private keys to his Ripple fortune went missing after he died. So, strange things in the world of, it's got a little bit kind of a Brock Pierce meets Hunter Biden vibe, and then dies after taking ayahuasca, which, I mean, given this guy that was doing opiates all the time, it seems like, I don't know, I think it's relatively rare that you would have a heart attack on ayahuasca, though ayahuasca, I think its dangers are often downplayed in the new agey kind of psychedelic community.
Yeah. Maybe he saw something that really freaked him out. Maybe he saw some machine elves.
My God, maybe he took too much of a heroic dose.
I think I saw Tom DeLonge saying, or DeLonge, sorry, I'm going to continue doing that, saying something to the effect of, when people take psychedelic drugs, they also do the same thing. Why?
That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. I actually don't know Tom DeLonge's overall stance on psychedelics and whether or not they're a gateway to interact with ETs. But that's definitely a common...
I don't know. I did see in certain Googling around, I came upon a couple articles that I guess mentioned him because he's a notable celebrity who's super into UFOs. I guess there, whenever some other celebrity would be into UFOs, he would come up. And I did see a story about Miley Cyrus seeing a UFO.
I was just looking through that this morning. Post Malone saw a UFO.
And
Demi Lovato
went out to Joshua Tree and looked up at the sky and was like, "We must That's another thing that's arguably sus. In addition to the phenomenon loving and worshiping the Pentagon and the defense industry, to the community and the intelligence community, and also just generally worshiping billionaires and calling Lawrence Rockefeller the great philanthropist first and foremost. They also really at the end they talked about the Aerial UFO encounter in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
I think that's what it was called. What the?
It was all the school children saw.
Yeah. And they were like, the main message that they got was like, it was very like Greta Thunberg, it was very much like there will be no more trees. They were like, it was funny because they were like Rhodesian like children, and they were all like,
they were.
Yeah, and they were like, we saw a message that that aliens told us like there would be no more trees, like we're hurting the planet, or what. It was very much like, sort of like the children are telling you, it was that kind of thing.
It's a very common trope with UFOs. I mean, initially it had to do with nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
that was a big thing.
Yeah, that they're here
and now
to
it's
tell
more
us
about
that we need to stop. Yeah, exactly.
You're doing climate change, but it's funny. I don't know. Like maybe it's interesting. These aliens are never like you need to stop capitalism. No alien has ever advocated.
I wonder if no alien has ever said that. I wonder if like no alien ever appeared to the Soviets who was like capitalism is bad. Or if
we're gonna have to look into that because you could almost get the impression that given all of these theories about how like the Soviets and the Americans are actually secretly working together to like do this, it's almost like it seems like at some point like the aliens told the Soviets to like stand down.
Well, I mean, if there was truly like if there was like unlimited energy like power source or whatever, like that would allow these like things to fly without propellers or whatever and like do these amazing feats, maybe we would have like a perpetual John Galt energy machine and we wouldn't need capitalism. Although I guess John Galt did believe, whatever. But anyway, like.
But it does make you wonder.
If you didn't give it away in a contract to the army, then
yes, it does make you wonder, like, what is up if these aliens, because this gets thrown around a lot, that they want to upstep us or they want to help us, like, stop fighting with each other and everything. If they're so advanced, why do they not understand that, like, if they really want us to stop, unless there's some kind of weird prime directive thing where like they can't do it, but
the prime directive forbids them to criticize capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. We have to learn. We have to discover it ourselves.
Well, maybe they don't have. I mean, yeah, I guess it's an interesting ideological thing because on one hand, like, do the aliens have a theory of capitalism per se? Like, I feel like there's an objective. Well, there's maybe a different level of objectivity. I mean, you could question it. Certainly, like, one could point to capitalism as the root problem, but maybe they simply don't have that analysis. I don't know. Like, well, it depends on, like, what nature do we think, like, these aliens are. I feel like, I'm a little bit partial. Jacques Vallée is someone who's sus, and John Keel, like, there's some susness to him as well, but they were mostly of like the opinion that the aliens or like the ultra-terrestrials or whatever were like largely nefarious in some way. So Jacques
Vallée felt that they were somewhat nefarious.
Yeah, that they were largely nefarious or being deceptive. Like he wrote in Passport to Magonia. Actually, it's funny because the PDF copy that I have is a very funny note on this part. He's talking about this interesting situation where I'll just read the account because these UFO cases are interesting. So anyway, the following Italian case took place in Abbiate Guazzone near Varese on April 24th, 1950. At 10 p.m., Bruno Facchini heard and saw sparks which he attributed to a storm, but he soon discovered a dark mass hovering between a pole and a tree 200 yards from his house. A man dressed in tight-fitting clothes and wearing a helmet appeared to be making repairs. There were 3 other figures working around the huge craft. This work being over, a trap through which light had been shining was closed, and the thing took off. Other details were as follows. The object made a sound similar to that of a giant beehive, and the air seemed strangely warm around it. 2 of the men were standing on the ground near a ladder. The third one was on a telescopic elevator, the base of which touched the ground, and was holding something near a group of pipes. This produced a spark seen by Facchini. They were about 5 feet 9 inches tall, dressed in gray diving suits with an oval transparent glass in front of their faces, which were concealed behind gray masks. From the fore portion of the mask, a flexible pipe emerged at the level of the mouth. They wore earphones. Inside the craft could be seen a series of oxygen-type containers and many dials. When Ficini offered his help, the men talked amongst themselves in guttural sounds, and one of them took a camera-like device from around his neck and projected a beam of light on Ficini, who tumbled away for several yards. He was then caught by a rush of air and thrown again to the ground. They subsequently ignored him as they recovered the elevator and brought it inside the craft, which took off. After a sleepless night, Ficini returned to the site and found some metal fragments left by the soldering operation, also 4 circular imprints and patches of scorched grass. He revealed the observation only 10 days later when his doctor treated him for the pains and bruises resulting from his fall and advised him to call the police. The Ministry of Defense technicians who examined the metal samples found them to consist of an anti-friction material very resistant to heat. The incident had other witnesses who testified privately. Had Mr. Ficini been exposed deliberately to a fake apparition of space beings? What could be the purpose of such a worldwide elaborate hoax? Who can afford to contrive such a complex scheme for so little apparent result? Is human imagination alone capable of playing such tricks on itself? Or should we hypothesize that an advanced race somewhere in the universe or sometime in the future has been showing us three-dimensional space operas for the last 2,000 years in an attempt to guide our civilization? If so, they certainly do not deserve our congratulations. Are we dealing instead with a parallel universe where there are human races living and where they may go at our expense, never to return to the present? Are these races only semi-human, blah, 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 so... yeah.
So Valley, I mean, I think it's interesting, and it kind of syncs up with just some of the stuff I've seen on his Wikipedia article here, where he started out trying to validate the extraterrestrial hypothesis, or ETH as they called it. But by 1969, his conclusions began to change, and he publicly stated that the ETH was too narrow and ignored too much data. He started exploring the commonalities between UFOs, cults, religious movements, demons, angels, ghosts, cryptid sightings, and psychic phenomena. And that's when he wrote Passport to Magonia, From Folklore to Flying Saucers. So he started to gravitate towards basically a multi-dimensional visitation hypothesis. And this hypothesis represents an extension of the ETH where the alleged extraterrestrials could be potentially from anywhere. The entities could be multidimensional beyond space-time, thus they could coexist with humans yet remain undetected. And I guess he got a lot of crap from ufologists back then for saying this.
But that to me is more, his... that type of theory, which Keel also kind of advanced, that to me is more tenable than... like the sort of conventional, especially since, if you do look back at these old cases, I think that you could say there's something to the phenomenon. I don't think that, all these people are just, yokels who lied. But the fact is that they reported that, these aliens came from Mars, from Venus, that they would do these wacky things, that they were flying, like the airship story, So what, the nature of this has more to do with the mind, than... it's not just purely they're the Draco and they come down or whatever, it's
yes, exactly.
There's something subtle going on,
I do think it's more tenable. I guess he wrote down 5 specific arguments that kind of contradict the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and those 5 are that 1, unexplained close encounters are far more numerous than required for any physical survey of the Earth. 2, the humanoid body structure of the alleged aliens is not likely to have originated on another planet and is not biologically adapted to space travel. 3, the reported behavior in thousands of abduction reports contradicts the hypothesis of genetic or scientific experimentation on humans by an advanced race. 4, the extension of the phenomenon throughout recorded human history demonstrates that UFOs are not a contemporary phenomenon. And 5, the apparent ability of UFOs to manipulate space and time suggests radically different and richer alternatives. So, I think...
I forgot to note the funny little... or read the funny little marginalia next to that paragraph that I read about, whether this advanced race is showing us these three-dimensional space operas. He says, the writer, whoever scanned this, PDF, of the book, writes in the margins, quite simply to draw one's attention away from the fact, in all caps, that they are quite literally fallen angels/demons.
Wow.
Which is, a very popular idea. But, I am more partial to that than, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. In fact...
in a way, the idea that these are djinn
Yeah, I think that they are
somehow
djinn,
more
basically.
more viable.
Yeah, they're djinn,
than...
I think. I think the Greys are djinn. Yeah, for sure. Toyd's probably djinn as well. You know. Yeah, I think that's the most plausible.
Or George H.W. Bush has a kind of hologram machine that can transform him into looking like a reptoid.
Both are possible, for sure. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Vallée contributed to the investigation of the miracle at Fatima and the Marian apparitions, and kind of hypothesized that they might have been UFO sightings, as opposed to, which kind of cuts in the other direction. That, you know, religious things throughout history are like, you know, people in flying saucers
like, but
down.
they're in some way like the same, like they have like commonalities, like phenomenologically. Like I think that is sort of true. Like that, you know, like these sort of experiences of like that might be described as like angelic encounters, or like, you know, but that's the thing, like there's always like deception involved. Like this is something that like is baked into like these religious traditions where Satan will often take like all sorts of forms, including the famously like the form of an angel of light, you know. So
Lucifer.
Like, so like the idea, like, you know, if someone's like, oh, you know, seeing these aliens, they're like, we've come in peace, like we will tell you the star map, like we must stop doing, you know, saying certain things that are true, you know,
telling
like,
you what you want to hear. But then
exactly.
not telling you things you don't want to hear, like, you know, stop doing capitalism, it's evil.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we just need to do more capitalism, and that's how, you know, maybe that's why Tom DeLonge is so confident, because, like, some kind of ET came to him and was like, all you gotta do is, like, team up with, like, you know, the defense, with a bunch of defense contractors. Essentially, I read another New Republic article that was about Louis Elizondo, who we mentioned earlier. It says, Elizondo left the Pentagon in October 2017. He said, over the military secrecy and inertia, during his tenure, one senior defense agency official in particular expressed discomfort with investigation of UFOs because the official, a staunch Christian, felt the evidence suggested UFOs were demonic. Yes, crazy as it may sound, Elizondo's story certainly gave the DIA executives conclusions a whiff of plausibility. Yeah, you know. But anyway, yeah, so apparently that idea is represented somewhere.
Yeah. I did also notice, just to circle back real quick to what we were saying a minute ago about, you know, like, why are these, what was the political persuasion of these UFOs? I actually found on CIA.gov there is a declassified article by J. Allen Hynek, who is the ufologist who is, I think, Jacques Vallée's mentor, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is called the UFO Gap, and it is about wondering what the Soviets know about UFOs. And it says, America's leading ufologist, just back from an international astronomers conference behind the Iron Curtain, warns that a new Soviet investigative approach could cost us the race to solve the flying saucer riddle. And he quotes, Russians solve UFO mystery, in a headline. For years, I've opened the New York Times with the fear skittering around the back of my mind that I might find that quote. In my occasional dreams, the story under the headline explains that the Russians have found some previously unthought of, unstartling explanation for unidentified flying objects, or worse, that they have made first contact with an alien civilization conducting reconnaissance missions to our planet. Either story would shake America so hard that the launching of Sputnik in 1957 would appear in retrospect as important as a Russian announcement of a particularly large wheat crop. The possibility of a Russian breakthrough on the UFO problem is unlikely if we believe official Russian statements that the problem does not exist. At last August's 13th General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union in Prague, one of the Russian delegates answered my query about Soviet UFO study with a derisive laugh and the rather absurd comment, if flying saucers really exist, why aren't they buzzing over Prague right now? The same man, a senior Soviet astronomer, declined to attend a meeting I had organized to discuss the UFO problem, saying that since the UFOs did not exist, there was nothing to discuss. One of his colleagues slipped and said that Russian scientists were not permitted to discuss unidentified flying objects. Although we have reports of UFO sightings and phenomena from some 70 countries, the Soviet Union and other socialist countries have not contributed UFO reports. Judging by past Soviet behavior, this curious silence on a subject of increasing importance to science and government means only one thing, and indeed, there are some clues to actual Soviet study of the problem. A Russian astronomer admitted in Prague to an American scientist that he believed a problem existed. Another American scientist recently received a note from the secretary of an official Soviet organization for the study of UFOs, and the Russians announced at Prague they would participate in a future international conference on interstellar communication. And basically, there are publications within the Soviet Union that are basically saying there is a such thing, and calling for a careful, many-sided scientific investigation. And it basically goes on. So it says, I think what we knew is that the Soviets did investigate this stuff.
Definitely, they did.
No.
And. Yeah, I'm sure that other countries also had some interest in the subject. Insofar as the U.S. did, and their interest in it was sort of publicized. I think that they in the same way that it's actually interesting. In the same New Republic article I just mentioned, where the demonic possible origins of the UFOs was expressed by that one DIA official. It writes, Elizondo, the son of a Cuban exile, of course, who'd worked with the CIA on the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Oh my God, okay.
Enlisted in Army counterintelligence during the early 1990s. He showed me a picture of himself as a young soldier wearing Army greens and an old garrison cap. Elizondo flirted with becoming a psychic spy, but that program was shut down, so he became a regular spy. After working in Afghanistan and Cuba, he was tapped to run counterintelligence for the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Again, it was allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
But another sort of funny thing that they mentioned is that this is about, again, someone who I think that you brought up is a Hal Puthoff, who founded To the Stars, and Russell Targ. It also talks about that.
Both big SRI guys.
Yeah. Russell Targ is a pioneering physicist whose early career advanced humanity's understanding of lasers, but he's best known for the decade he spent studying extrasensory perception, or ESP, and psychic abilities with Stanford-trained electrical engineer Harold Hal Puthoff, who co-founded To the Stars with Tom DeLonge, and now sits on the group's executive board. So there's a link between the same way that the U.S. was interested in psychic phenomenon. They were interested in living consciousness, you see, can be separated spatially by thousands of miles, but may have no psychic distance between them. And the most remarkable thing we were able to do was get the CIA to let us study that for 20 years, Targ said in a 2015 lecture about his and Puthoff's research into remote viewing. Much of their work performed at Stanford Research Institute, the same place that made Siri on your iPhone, focused on the psychic abilities of mentalists like spoon-bending Uri Geller. Geller was shown on multiple occasions to be a fraud, yet somehow managed to secure steady streams of funding from oil and mining companies to act as a psychic dowsing rod. Again, the metallurgy connection.
That's right. Yeah.
But this is funny. Nevertheless, Puthoff and Targ's research into psychic abilities was well funded, in no small part because of a former Nazi rocket scientist. I got the program started by showing Werner von Braun a mechanical ESP teaching machine at a conference on speculative technology, Targ said. After World War II ended and Operation Paperclip began, von Braun and several hundred of his Teutonic brothers gave up all their Nazi beliefs and shifted seamlessly into the simple existence of American rocket scientists living in Alabama. Von Braun, who reportedly had a clairvoyant grandmother as well as a cozy relationship with the U.S. intelligence community, was prodigiously successful with my ESP game, Targ explained. He took me to meet the administrator of NASA, and that was the first money we got to start the program. So,
wow.
Dope.
So, von Braun, who died in 1977, he founded a lot of nonprofits in Silicon Valley, including I think the L5 Society, which is about colonizing the moon. And he drew up a lot of, I think, prototypes for orbital space stations and things like that, and was couldn't literally was in charge of building the American rocket program. So was definitely an SS officer, and his brother, I think it was Magnus von Braun, was one of the top executives of Chrysler. So all the von Braun brothers, he was a senior executive at Chrysler, who was a Luftwaffe aviator, and they made sure to surrender to Alan Dulles and that whole crew. And and also Sigismund von Braun, who was the Secretary of State of West Germany in the 1970s. So, I mean, he came from a very high Prussian background. Actually, a descendant of Philip III of France, Valdemar I of Denmark, Robert III of Scotland, and Edward III of England. So, I mean, talk about bloodlines, y'all. I did not realize that they tested out the ESP devices on Werner von Braun.
And he did well at it, apparently.
Wow.
Well, he definitely, knew how to, plan for the future.
Well, okay, that's actually that's kind of a good pivot point here, because I think something that gets bandied about a lot, but I feel like even Tom DeLonge, even when he mentions it, he doesn't like put it in its proper context. Like, for example, I listened to a little bit of his interview a few years ago with Joe Rogan, which was like a lot of kind of off the rails stuff. But he mentions that his personal belief is that the craft that crashed at Roswell was not actually an ET craft, but was a Nazi German aircraft that was constructed in Argentina and was flown. And so we get to the point where I think if there's any version of a kind of UFOs are real but they're man-made, I would find personally the most compelling hypothesis would perhaps be that these were experimental Nazi aircraft that were brought over to the U.S. and shared, perhaps in a very secret way, with the U.S. government. And it's hard to trace further than that, but I mean, you have... I don't know. You have things like DiScLoSuRe, which is a sort of
alleged device that Aquino had his big interest in that would help the Nazis to peacefully end World War II. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think some UFOs must inherently be man-made. Some, not all unidentified flying objects are whatever. I do think that there is some kind of weird phenomenon going on that is beyond that, but probably the vast majority of them, and some of them certainly are advanced classified aircraft. I'm sure if you look at a stealth bomber, I'm sure that people saw that before it was a known thing. That is very much like a UFO in appearance to me.
Totally. Even though I guess the big thing about the UFOs time and again seemed to be that it's aerodynamics seem to defy everything we know about physics. And gravity.
Exactly. Well, the way they fly. I mean, one thing that bothers me sometimes is when people say that UFOs aren't aerodynamic because insofar as UFOs are flying saucers. Obviously some UFOs are cigar shaped, which doesn't make any sense or whatever, but Tic Tacs, that does seem weird. Does seem like they have some weird propulsion, but the whole thing of a flying saucer, I mean, that kind of makes sense. This is basically a frisbee, that is aerodynamic. I think in the Unidentified show on History Channel, they named the 5 observables, which were not a feature of my UFO encounter, but they were things that they classified as being the sort of most prominent or most important aspects of these UFO encounters that especially the ones that the military and the Navy were having, the ones that were kind of highlighted in the thing. So they say that it needs to have anti-gravity lift. They can overcome Earth's gravity with no visible means of propulsion. Sudden and instantaneous acceleration, so when they'll be hovering and then suddenly they'll go vloop, out of nowhere, and just disappear. Hypersonic velocities without signatures. No vapor trails or sonic booms, low observability or cloaking, where they disappear, and trans-medium travel. So, they might go into the ocean, they might be in the sky, they might fly up into space, So those are the 5 big things they have. My UFO encounter did not have any of those features, so those are the big things that they'll point to. And those are mysterious things. I guess when the Navy pilots describe their encounters, again, it could just all be a limited hangout, a psyop, they could be fabricated events, but I don't know. Yeah, it is weird how like these kind of experiences have tracked with the transformations in our own imagination of how these things might function. Even the flying saucers have more and more disappeared. And, like, now we have this idea of, like, this tic-tac, this sort of sleek white object, like, all white. It kind of reminds me of, like, the case that your iPods or your earpods or whatever, your AirPods.
Very
come
seamless.
in, it's, like, very much like, and, even in the unidentified documentary, it's funny, because if you go back to those airship cases that Valet mentioned, a lot of the people would be like, actually, I think Thomas Edison had to, like, make a statement where he was like, no, I did not create an airship. I have not been flying an airship around, because everyone was saying, like, oh, it's Thomas Edison. In the documentary, they're like, maybe Elon Musk, made this or whatever, So it's the same sort of thing where there's a secret inventor who's kind of suspected, of doing this. And, like, they kind of track with the imagination of how these things might be. I don't know. Like, they are, like, the cases themselves, like, have a certain persuasiveness to them. But their nature is, unclear. Those do far outstrip what we know of being, like, those would outstrip the capabilities of a stealth bomber. And I definitely do remember, like, people saying that kind of stuff about UFOs, and that's how they're depicted as, like, moving, zigzagging, hovering, like, and then, like, flying with incredible velocity, like, even going way back to, like, the 70s and stuff.
Exactly.
So it is weird.
Yeah, it's weird, and it does seem there does seem to be something in terms of, like, physics going on where these things are doing things. It does bring the question, like, why wouldn't any kind of above ground physicists or engineers be able to come up with something even remotely that operates in the same way as these phenomena?
Yeah, I guess, like, the idea is that they're not really, they're not real, there's something else, like, but yeah,
I guess if you take kind of the djinn hypothesis, then it's like they really could just be just about anything. And,
they could take any form.
They're an apparition, basically.
Yeah, well, people see, like, truly bizarre stuff, like, and have attested to, like, seeing very strange things, even to this day, that don't, like, fit into the idea that, and I think Jacques Vallée's point is a good one, that, if something was really developing on a different planet, like, just going by, like, the evolutionary idea, like, surely there must be something more than just, like, this kind of, like, scientific view on it, because the aliens just look simply, a lot of times look way too similar to human beings. Like,
exactly.
So,
sometimes they literally look like human beings. Like,
your stock UFO hypothesis, your stock, ET hypothesis is definitely out. We could say that it's, like, all a psyop. You could say that there's djinn, but I definitely, my friend and I have had an ongoing debate about whether greys are animals or djinn. I strongly take the djinn position on the greys.
Just to be fair, I think maybe one of the normative explanations among ufologists in this world was kind of that they were like remote controlled puppets, like they were avatars.
Yeah. I actually heard that they were, like, human fetuses that were, grown, like, drones or whatever, that were, like, grown in these deep underground military bases, and, like,
there's been all kinds of variations of that, including Annie Jacobsen.
They were basically wet computers, They were, like,
wet
programmed
CPUs.
Biological computers that were programmed to just do experiments or whatever.
Basically that the aliens, like, there's some kind of, I don't know, almost like spectral intelligence, or they exist in a form very different than ours, and they use these, like, meat puppet bodies to kind of, like, that they can, like, telepathically control to go around and, like, explore the universe, which, I don't know, it's, like, kind of like if you're a non-corporeal being, do you need a spaceship at that point? It kind of just seems a little bit...
Yeah, well, certainly if they're non-corporeal beings. I guess it would make some sense if they were, like, but why would you build, like, a bipedal humanoid android? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Why
not
just build like a human form so you could, like, walk around and, like, go undercover?
Perfectly. Yeah.
It does seem to be. It doesn't quite add up. But the other thing is that like Annie Jacobsen, who is kind of like I would say kind of the normie gatekeeper of a lot of like Area 51 and like UFO stuff. She also interestingly, and I think probably relatedly, wrote like the book on Operation Paperclip. Mm-hmm. So all those things tie together. But I remember her going on like Jon Stewart back in the day and advancing this theory, which people, I don't know. I don't think the UFO community was convinced, but like normies were kind of like satisfied by it. That basically the Roswell crash like was actually an experimental aircraft, but it was from the Soviet Union, and the pilots were like little
was
people
this the woman who
or like
went
dwarves.
On, like, is this the woman who went on the Daily Show and was like, "Yeah, I'll tell you what Roswell was all about," or whatever?
That is
yeah,
her. That is her.
I remember this.
Yeah, and she came out more recently with like another book where she's she's like a more refined like professional version of Tom DeLonge. I feel like at the end of the day,
well, she's like an academic.
So
she's like, I'm a historian. I'll tell you what
I definitely feel like she gets paid. She gets paid the big bucks to do like a culture, the kind of limited hangout you could print in the New Yorker and make everybody scratch their chin with satisfaction. And so she said that there were like dwarves or something, or like mentally like mentally retarded children from the Soviet Union that had been like trained as pilots in these little tiny UFO pods, and they were specifically she said that they weren't actually like operating aircraft, but they were like taken there kind of like they were gliders basically, and like a covert like Soviet airplane had like released them over New Mexico and had them crash to like psyop the Americans into thinking that there were like alien UFOs scouting around, and this is like all like Stalin's idea.
Interesting plan. Okay.
Which like is
it's
pretty.
Weird to
think of how far out that idea
US
is.
Airspace would be able to be infiltrated so easily by a Soviet plane that would then deploy this like UFO glider, and like that does not seem plausible to me, especially like the idea like why would there need to be like little dwarves in it? Like, why not just use like dummies, like
I guess they wanted to make them think that these were aliens.
How would they make that mistake though?
Yeah, because
like,
they would do an autopsy.
Like, are they so stupid? Yeah, that they're going to be like,
It sounds way more likely that something the U.S. government would like
unless,
do
like,
to itself.
Unless Stalin thought that that the capitalists were just like so stupid that they would like think that a bunch of dwarves and like a glider were actually aliens. Like,
and I don't know, from everything I know about Stalin, I don't think he was that dumb. I think Annie Jacobsen, she's relying on that kind of unconscious like anti-communist logic of like wacky dictator. Just thought
it seems like the same idea of being like if you like play into like an Iraqi's head, like this is the voice of Allah, and show like a bearded man or whatever, he'll like stop. If you show him like the fucking God hologram from the end of Star Trek 5, he'll be like, oh my God, like it's Allah.
Exactly.
I better not fight the United States anymore.
Well, so we know from that and from like Operation Wandering Soul that these are ideas the U.S. military has pursued for a long time.
Thing. Yeah, thank you. I remember like watching that and being like, like I don't know. No,
it's bad. It's bad. I think she just swerves you away from that kind of. She lures you in with like.
It's such a comforting explanation too, because there's like a little bit of a conspiracy involved, but like doesn't implicate the United States at all. Like, and it certainly lets you write off like the whole mystery of like ETs or the ultra terrestrials, or dare I say, the djinn angle. And you're just like, totally comforted that it was just some wacky, it's like the ultimate, like, and I remember like, Jon Stewart or whoever, I think it was still Jon Stewart then, being like, "Are you kidding me? Like, wow, we need to restore sanity."
Wacky Soviets. And also I think it's worth noting that later on in a more recent interview, maybe she did a couple years ago, like she wrote a subsequent book about UFOs and had this like one I don't know, Department of Defense, like, insider that gave her... Most of her book is kind of just, like, the unsourced, anonymous allegations of, like, one mysterious guy. And she, you know, basically accepts what he's saying and kind of puts it in that creative nonfiction kind of little casing, so that you're just so compelled by, like, the story and the people that you are kind of, like, on this journey, and she wants you to believe this guy. But I guess he kind of tearfully confessed to her at one point that... and this sounds very bizarre, but that, like, the U.S. also did the same thing as the Soviets. They took, like, developmentally disabled children who were tiny and, like, put them in test aircraft and, like, I don't know, crashed them, and, like, most of them died or something, like, because this guy was claiming that they had actually recovered a UFO at some point, and that they, like, put, like, developmentally disabled, like, dwarf children. This is an American, you know, insider who's saying that, and that it, like, you know, it haunts him to this day, but, like, you know, there was no...
I think I vaguely remember you telling me this story.
Yeah, there was, like, no other way for him to... And so immediately I hear from that is, like, okay, now I'm thinking that, like, we did this, and the Soviets never did, but you just threw the Soviet thing in there first to make it sound kind of like MKUltra. Like, oh, well, they figured out brainwashing first. But then, you know, we were panicked, and we had to put handicapped children into, you know, gliders and crash them in the desert to psyop everybody.
Maybe. I just feel like that's a terrible... I mean, again, like, the idea, as, like, Jacques Vallée points out, like, the idea of, like, dwarves, like, you know, from the hidden world, like, is a big thing, and, like, dwarves have, you know, little people, you know, have always had, like, a sort of... they've always been kind of sacralized in the way that people who are in some way non-normative have often been people who are mentally, like, you know, neurodivergent, or people who have physical differences have always in a way been sacralized. But I just simply do not think that dressing up a bunch of, like, and you know what? It's funny because it all reminds me of the episode. Again, it's funny because... You know, people always point to The Outer Limits as being, like, the reason why, like, Betty and Barney Hill, like, you know, had this whole UFO experience or whatever, and, like, the whole reason why people see grays and whatnot, you know, like, as because they were with something kind of, like, with wraparound eyes on The Outer Limits or whatever. But, you know, I think of the Outer Limits episode, The Architects of Fear. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but basically, like, Alan Moore ripped it off for Watchmen. And it's basically, but it's a little bit more of a, like, Altered State / The Fly type story, because it's weird, like, all these dudes in a smoke-filled room, and they pick one of them to basically be transformed into a Thetan, or a fake alien, to undergo, like, this complex biosurgery to, like, this, you know, genetic sort of splicing and stuff, to get basically transformed physically into this Thetan creature, so that it could then fool, like, because even in the, like, show, like, they understand that, like, this has to be able to fool, like, the top scientists, you know, like, it has to be, you know, when they do the, like, they had to think, like, okay, well, this really is an alien creature. Like, I don't think that, like, it takes, like, a huge, like, you know, I mean, that to me almost, like, kind of falls under the whole thing of, like, oh, these wacky, like, MKUltra, like, how dumb would you be to, like, you know, think that it was going to fool anybody to put, like, a bunch of dwarves in a shitty glider? And, you know, I almost feel like...
It sounds way too bumbling, and...
I almost feel like genetically, or, like, not genetically even, but, like, sort of Frankenstein together some kind of meat puppet alien would be more feasible, you know? Like, kind of... making some kind of, like, a Fiji mermaid type thing, like
they got little chimeras gulping for air,
like,
and tanks, folks.
The poor creatures.
The human animal chimera labs that Alex Jones has raged about for years.
But even something cruder than that, like, you know, a Fiji mermaid type beast, you know, like, so, like a stitched together, like, kind of monkey or something, you know, like a bald monk, like, you know, shave a monkey or shave a chimpanzee or something like that, you know, like that would be, I don't know, but, like,
seems like there's got to be so many more levels to this whole thing, and that cannot be kind of like the big reveal. That it was like this wacky like, you know, glider psyop that with, like, murdered children strapped into the cockpit. in like a dumb attempt to like scare the Americans.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't even know if he would want to scare the Americans in that way.
I mean, that's not to absolve, like, either the Americans or the Soviets of doing, like, messed up experiments upon, like, children or especially, like, you know, people who had disabilities of any kind, you know? Like, I'm sure that did happen. Like, I'm sure that, like, there were all sorts of, like, depraved experiments that were done, you know, on human beings, you know, for whatever reason. But I just don't know if, like, I buy the story of, like, the calculus behind... It would just be like an incredible ineptitude that I just feel like would not fool anyone. It would just be a laughing stock, like if they, you know,
it would be a joke.
Really, like that would work as a psyop if you wanted them to think that there were no real UFOs when there actually were. Like, you know,
In a
they're
way,
like, oh,
yeah.
well, they're really grasping at straws here. Like, this is the best they come up with. Like, there must be nothing to this UFO stuff.
Or honestly, I know it's still wacky, but I thought if maybe like some, you know, underground Reich Nazis wanted to psyop America into thinking they were UFOs, I would almost find that much more believable from their standpoint of like they don't have a lot to work with except maybe some experimental aircraft, and you know they have no compunction about snatching some kids and doing horrible Mengele experiments to them and make them look like whatever. And if they could do that, maybe they could, you know, they could like psyop the government into creating the National Security Act and the CIA and like gearing up for like total Cold War. Even that, I'm kind of like,
Yeah,
they were all pretty fanatically anti-communist to begin with. I don't think they needed
that
kind
type
of
of like
alien threat.
Mengele experiment like was what you would need to like create something that like looked like an alien. Like, you know, they did do like weird like sort of experiments that like in trying to dye kids' eyes blue or whatever. Like, you know,
I mean, if I'm just
twins.
Yes, I'm just saying for the argument that, you know, if you look at the time, what was it, 1947 was Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
Mengele was doing his experiments in like 1942, 1943, 44. So that means that some of the children and the maybe messing with, you know, like trying to breed children and things like that. His experiments at Auschwitz, those children, if they did indeed survive, would be like 4 or 5 years old. So, but of course, that's still, you know, kind of a reach for the whole.
It is a bit of a reach, but.
And honestly, I mean, even the idea, you know, because there is a lot of stuff swirling around, you know, Nazis, and of course, we've talked again and again about their fascination with the occult, and they're trying to channel.
I was going to say, I feel like they would be like, it's insulting to the aliens to imply that they would be like deformed, like, you know, intervention, when like really we know aliens are like white Aryan gods.
12-foot tall Nordic Chads.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
Maybe if a bunch of white alien gods were discovered, then it would be like the Nazis. But yeah, I don't know.
We don't know, but it definitely seems like, that Annie Jacobsen, thumbs down.
If I had my own world, I'd fill it with wealth and desire. A glorious past you admire. And voices of kids out walking dogs, birds, planes, cleanest cars. If I had my own world, I'd love it for all that's inside it. The freedom of wars, death, or riots. The freedom of police, packed parking lots, guns, bombs sounding up. If I had my own world, I built you an empire. Here to the far lands, to spread love like violence. If I had my own world, I'd build you an empire. From here to the far lands, to spread love like violence. Let me feel you, carry you higher. Watch our words spread, hope like fire. Secret crowds rise up and gather. Hear your voices, sing back louder.
I think the final thing we want to talk about, like in the greater context of To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, and all this stuff, is a little something we mentioned a lot before called Project Bluebeam. which, unlike Project Blue Book, is not a verified government program, but is something that
Project Blue Beam is very much not that. Although it does have a lot of currency, like you hear about it a lot. I guess it's a compelling idea to people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I feel like it kind of does like sort of link up with maybe the John Lilly like solid state intelligence thing, or it has some similarities with the idea that Jesus, like the star in the sky was like a craft, like all this stuff. Like you see the classic Blue Beam like graphic, the illustration I've seen online of like Jesus appearing in the sky with like all these UFOs behind him.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did want to bring up relative to the stars, and maybe relative to Blue Beam as well, I just kind of had an epiphany that, I mean, we might need to explore this later on, but I always remember the outer limits being coming up and being blamed for people, people thinking that aliens were real, blah, blah, like they watched the outer limits, and that's why they, all this UFO stuff, was a thing. And, I actually noticed, I'm reading, I did find Richard Doty's, like, one of his famous little psyops that he did, which was based around the idea of Project Serpo, which is basically, like, a long sort of story about some troops going to an alien planet. But the race of aliens that lives there are called Ebons. I can't help but associate that with the episode of The Outer Limits, Nightmare, which is one of the better episodes of the original Outer Limits, featuring the planet Ebon and Ebonites, who do look kind of like, your standard alien with a big head and things. And I'm kind of wondering, like, is the Outer Limits itself, like, a limited hangout, like, psyop, seeding some of these ideas, like,
I mean...
Yeah, he also brought up the idea that, like, if one reads the Yellow Book, the true and correct history of mankind is relayed by the ETEs, extraterrestrial entities, and reads between the lines, one would come away with a thought and clear impression that the Ebons is something to do with Jesus Christ, or possibly Jesus was one of them. Yeah, there's...
Okay, I mean, there is that. I mean, I think that's definitely something I think we can explore at a later date, these, like, sci-fi shows in particular.
Yeah,
I've seen over the years a lot of, like, really interesting stuff around Gene Roddenberry, and maybe I think if there was anything that was almost like almost like a Sesame Street for smart scientific adults, it would have maybe been Star Trek in terms of modeling a kind of utopian future and kind of. Even though you could, on the surface of it, I know a lot of people have, referred to, like, the society of, Starfleet or whatever as kind of like space communism, but at the same time...
Yeah, although it's very vague. Like, sometimes they're like, we have evolved beyond money, but then they're like, can I have some Federation credits or whatever, or, like, things like that. Yeah, it just depends on, like, what the expediencies of the plot are. I think that's really one of the most invidious, like, things, or, like, one of the most, like, maybe perfidious is what I mean, one of the most unctuous, like, beliefs, like, that has been perpetuated by Star Trek, because that really is, like, the eschatology or the imagination of what the future will be that's become, like, dominant, like, that's the To the Stars Academy, the idea, like, we're gonna go into space and, like, we're gonna colonize the universe and, like, it's all gonna be, like, about, it's...
And Elon Musk, Bezos, like, all these guys have a kind of a Trekkie mentality a little bit, like, they're gonna be the founding fathers of Starfleet.
Yeah, and everyone lives to be, like, 300 years old, and, like, they go into the joy matrix, and they, like, come at, or whatever, like,
they've got their holodeck. It's funny how they have, like, a holodeck in Star Trek, but it hasn't, like, cannibalized their entire society, and there's not just, like, masses of, like, impoverished people, like, living in a holodeck.
They did do one episode about a guy who, like, was addicted to the holodeck, because it was just, like, doing, like... Yeah, I mean, it's like a very PG show, but it was kind of implied that he was like, having like this, he was like effing Counselor Troy in there, and like stuff like that.
There's so many things kind of unexplored in the with the kind of utopian gloss and like the maturity, the blank maturity of all Star Trek characters for the most part. At least all the humans, they're all models of rationality. When you get to the Klingons, they're kind of a little uppity, and the Ferengis are very money hungry.
They're super like Star Trek is very like racist. Like in that respect. yeah, and like the Klingons, you know, especially like, you know, the Klingons are very much like the I guess the Soviets are supposed to represent in the original show, but yeah, like, and I remember, I'll never forget in 2001, you know, Star Trek Enterprise came out, which is like the more like patriotic Star Trek, and the main enemies on that show were the Suluban, who, you know, they were Muslim alien folks. Yeah. You know, they were on a desert planet. They were, you know,
Space Kalapa.
But yeah, exactly. So yeah, but like, yeah, so The Outer Limits is I mean, it's more of an anthology type thing, but it didn't have quite like the moral sort of thrust, but there were definitely episodes like that, you know, or that sort of typical thing you always hear, like, you know, you are destroying the day the Earth stood still, like, you must embrace peace.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's the only way, you know, like etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so yeah, I just anyway, that's like because I think that, like, To the Stars Academy is like the real like sort of successor of the Richard Doty operation. Yes. But yeah, anyway,
we were saying that like before we started recording, that we feel like the most rational explanation for To the Stars Academy, it is like just the next iteration of the UFO psyop, and which isn't even to say necessarily like what is under the lid that they're actually hiding, but we know that they're spreading lies and bullshit, and part of it is it does have this like new agey gloss that so much of the UFO world has, that kind of that it replaces that earlier fear about aliens and paranoia about them with a kind of like, they are here to help us, they are here to elevate us to the next level of our evolution.
Or and like, well, where are even they in all of this? Because like I feel like they are like slowly disappearing from the picture, and it's like this like phenomenon that we need to understand, which, you know, fair enough, but like, you know, I won't say it's not a phenomenon, but the like, you know, it seems like, yeah, like what are they, like I'm just very intrigued by the whole idea of these medals that they apparently have, like like why can't we see them? Why, like, are they real? Like, what is Tom DeLonge pulling? Like, who's this fool?
And why is the army going along with it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just not acceptable.
Why did the Navy? And you know, it was. I saw in a more recent article, like Chris Mellon has since come out and revealed himself to be like the source of all of these Pentagon like Navy videos that he gave to the New York Times, and then and now he is like affiliated officially with To the Stars Academy. And is he appears prominently in the Phenomenon movie, and I had to say, just to sort of you know, there's something that just never stopped triggering me about it, was that I think I told you before that one of the little buttons on his collar of like the dress shirt that he was wearing was like unbuttoned, and the other one was buttoned, and so every time they cut to him, it's like his tie is like fucked up, and it just thought, I know it's a small thing, but it's almost like that almost is symbolic of the psyop that's going on here. Like, do you want me to question like how competent you people are, because you're sitting down doing this whole documentary and like you don't even tell him to fix his fucking tie? Like, what? Oh god, you know, it doesn't. That movie definitely does not kind of elevate beyond the typical UFO bullshit culture, which kind of, it adds further kind of question to what Tom DeLonge is really up to, because the content that he has produced like for the History Channel and this movie so far is just simply like the next kind of modern iteration of UFO conspiracy movies. It's not really it's not leading to a qualitative change in necessarily in how people understand this phenomena. It's not really, it is kind of like repackaging like, you know, past accounts and dramatizing them and showing them to you, but I feel like there's not really much, except for there's like a few government people that are kind of coming out now and being like, yes, that was real, or, you know, yes, these videos are real, and there's still a lot of supposition going on. I think the movie just kind of, it doesn't even dive into it, it just ends it with like, we need to know the truth, and like, you know, implies that there's aliens behind it, but just sort of,
but like all these dudes, like, it's weird because like now at the vanguard of like the investigation or the movement for disclosure is like this like weird sus organization headed by like this dude who's like either incredibly naive, or like just a sus alert himself. And like,
I mean, it should be mentioned, there's a famous photograph, that has circulated for a long time of him posing with his guitar, which has like a customized Masonic neck with little Mason symbols up and down the neck. So
yes.
he's a Mason. There's also a picture of him. There are pictures of him meeting with him and Peter Levenda meeting John Podesta at the White House that had leaked a couple years ago. So somehow Peter Levenda, Mr. Sinister Forces, Nazi, UFO, whatever, is also wrapped up in this whole crew, which also includes, it should bear mentioning, like William Cohen, who was also a big UFO nut, who was Clinton's defense secretary, who was the one that brought Chris Mellon into the Pentagon, and also hired, I think, Pete Buttigieg for, like the Cohen group, some sketchy, like kind of Wall Street intelligence, like, risk management company or something. So like William Cohen is sus. And then also Bill Richardson, who is like one of the most like prominently accused people in the Epstein ring of like having sex with underage girls. Who is like the kingpin of New Mexico, where Epstein had a ranch. He's also in this documentary, talking a big game. And then, of course, you have John Podesta, who does seem to be like very genuinely kind of jazzed. And former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who seems a little, I mean, he's always been a very low energy guy, so it's hard to tell with him. But he doesn't seem as jazzed as John Podesta. But you have this whole kind of network of, going from like the Rockefellers to the Mellons to then like these sort of Clinton Democrats who are like connected to Epstein, and like,
I mean, Epstein was into the fringes of science as well.
I would love to know if Epstein had a UFO fascination. But
he was definitely into cryogenic stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm sure that he would have been listening to. Would have been open to what they had to say. To the Stars Academy.
I suppose. He never got to donate to them, unfortunately. And it should be mentioned that I looked on Chris Mellon's Twitter, and he is part of an organization called the Steady State. And he signed a public letter that was signed by like dozens of high level like government, Pentagon, intelligence officials endorsing Joe Biden for president. And I believe this was signed back in the primaries because it says that we believe he is like the best of all Democratic candidates to restore honor and blah 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 to America. So I mean, Chris Mellon, maybe he'll get a job now in the Pentagon, even though it seems like he's pretty far out there. But he
apparently still has defense connections. He still has existing networks. I mean, he's like ultimately belongs to this omnipotently wealthy dynasty. So I feel like he can have this eccentricity and do whatever he wants. And even if it's there, I'm sure there is a stigma to it in some quarters, but I don't know, like maybe it's all part of like some kind of way to manage this. I don't know.
I mean, I will say on this website, The Steady State, there's a link to articles, that endorse like their opinions or maybe were written by their members. And there's one called "Why We Need a Deep State" from The Hill, from earlier this year. And so I feel like
why we need a deep state.
Yeah, why we need a deep state.
Yes.
And they're saying yes. But actually, this is kind of about that group. There is a deep state, and we need it now more than ever. But it is better called the steady state. And yes, it exists within the intelligence community. And the steady state has members in every U.S. government agency and department, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, in a way, like this is the deep state. And, they got their... their way this time. I mean, I guess QAnon got outfoxed. These guys won, and now they're going to I don't know, give us UFO disclosure, maybe. Yeah.
This is a funny quote. On the 1991, this is from the Fader article. On the 1991 Blink-182 album "Enema of the State," DeLonge wrote the song titled "Aliens Exist." The next year, in an interview with the Los Angeles Times, the track was about aliens that come to Earth and fly up your butt. And it's true, hence the enema in the album's title. I'm one of those freaks that really believes that stuff exists, he wrote in a program for the accompanying tour. I think if anybody out there does a little bit of research, they will find they side with me. Yeah, he had like a lot of, debates, I guess, and tension with his bandmate Mark Hoppus, who said he believes anything he reads. You could say, I read in a magazine that an alien landed in Australia. A doctor found him and did an autopsy. There's footage on the internet. And Tom wouldn't even question it. He would take it as gospel and go around telling everybody.
Wow.
Well, I think they knew him pretty well.
Though I just want to say, we'd be tempted here to side with Mark Hoppus for whatever it's worth. When I was like in their target demo, I always liked Mark Hoppus better than Tom DeLonge, but I liked both of them better than Travis Barker, who I always found extremely annoying and still do to this day.
I never really listened to them. I did listen to I did hear Aliens Exist because I said I was into Aliens, so I had encountered the song. That was like, but I always found like that pop punk like way of performing, like the small thing. Like I always found that unbearable.
Tom DeLonge's like San Diego like vocal fry affect is one of the you're probably going to hear a little bit of it in the interludes to this episode, so I apologize in advance. But I think I just wanted to say I don't want to let Mark Hoppus off the hook, because I would be remiss not to mention this article from the AV Club in 2018 entitled Blink-182's Mark Hoppus says he advised the military on capturing Saddam Hussein. In the early 2000s, Blink-182 is an inescapable fact of life. Their pop-punk singles dominated MTV, the radio, movies about high school kids trying to get laid, and the Discmans of 14-year-olds across the world. They were so influential, in fact, that they may have even played a role in the capture of Saddam Hussein during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, at least according to bassist, vocalist, and possible military advisor Mark Hoppus. Responding to that tweet going around that asked people to share the least plausible story about yourself that's true, Hoppus revealed that roughly 15 years ago, he told American military officials his novel idea for how to locate Hussein. And I guess he wrote on Twitter, on an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, I told a Navy admiral on his way to meet with the Joint Chiefs of Staff my ideas on how to capture Saddam Hussein. And he elaborated, I guess he shared a picture of him hanging out on an aircraft carrier. Let's see. Let me pull it up. He deleted it. Interesting. But I guess, unfortunately, this Navy admiral hanging out with Mark Hoppus on an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf during the first year of the Iraq War ended up taking a different approach to Hussein's capture, the American military launching the successful Operation Red Dawn. Presumably, JCS was unsure of whether Blink-182's cultural cachet would hold up in the future. I feel like something's missing in this fucking article. Where I think he said something. Hold on. Now I'm gonna look at page 6 because he deleted the tweet that let's see. Okay, so here's what he said. At the time, Hussein was in hiding but continued releasing videotape messages to his followers. My idea was to have trucks with big speakers drive around blasting time code just out of frequency range of human hearing, but within the dynamic range of the video camera's microphone. When Saddam released a tape, he would have inadvertently recorded the time code. Using the time code, you could go back and pinpoint a general radius from where the truck was. With that information, you start the research. Also, knowing the general area of the recording, you can bring in more trucks to canvas there, and if you don't find him and you release another videotape message, you can use the multiple trucks' time codes for triangulation, revealing his exact location, Hoppus explained. Okay. So I guess they didn't go with that, but quite an elaborate plan using sonic warfare, basically, to smoke out Saddam Hussein. Why was he on
during that time when like it was like punk to like want to kill Saddam Hussein? Like, yes. You know, like so yeah, like that was it was a time when like being punk was like, you know, really hating Bin Laden, or like, what, you know,
that was that very
like, they don't hate Bin Laden enough, like, you know, like
they should have changed their name to War Crime.
Well, yeah, they should have. Exactly. Yeah, then they would have gotten. They just would have gotten. It's all about getting attention. So people will come to our shows. Okay. Like,
yeah. Like take off your pants and jacket or something like that. I jumped off the. I'm happy to say I jumped off the Blink-182 train when I like turned 13. Enema of the State was the last album I bought of theirs, and I found them incredibly annoying by the time like high school and like 9/11 came around. But I forget exactly what I think either Mark Hoppus's dad or Tom DeLonge's dad. Let's just do a little, before we get out of here, let's just do a little quick bio sweep, because I feel like one or both of their dads were in the aerospace industry in Southern California. Thomas Matthew DeLonge was born in Poway, California. His father was an oil company executive and his mother a mortgage broker. Okay. So, I mean, I think that maybe he is, his brother was in the United States Army. Yeah, let's see. And Mark Hoppus, his deal, he was, wow, okay. He was born in Ridgecrest, California. Ridgecrest is a small town in the California desert, composed mainly of what Hoppus later described as, quote, geniuses, scientists, physicists, and then just complete strung-out meth heads. Okay, I'm thinking that, yes, it's in, oh my God. It's in Kern County, and it is adjacent to the Naval Air Weapons Station at China Lake. My God. Get this. Oh, okay. His father, Hoppus's father, like many in Ridgecrest, worked for the U.S. Department of Defense, designing missiles and bombs for the town's Navy testing center.
Cool. Okay, so, yeah, well, my thing is that, like, Tom DeLonge, like, clearly thinks that, like, he has been, I mean, whether it's naive or not, he really does think he has been chosen by, like, I wonder if, like, he thinks that some kind of ET, like, came to him and, like, told him that he had been anointed for this task, but at the very least, he thinks that some kind of, like, the government has picked him to, like, do this. Maybe in fact they have.
I mean, they were together back then, so I don't know.
Something.
Was Tom DeLonge also on that Navy aircraft carrier in 2003?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
I mean,
weird.
I wonder if they were on like USO tours or something like that. Because I mean, why the fuck else would they be?
It must be a USO thing.
Which is interesting about these punks, and I feel like nobody even called them out at the time for like standing the U.S. military and like supporting even going out of their way. Very Steely Dan, by the way. Just doing a little side work with the Defense Department. In between their radical musical career. It's just like wow, and I think it is fascinating that nobody at the time. I mean, you had kind of in terms of like West Coast like pop punk, you had like Green Day like kind of break in one direction, and then I guess Blink-182 broke in another direction, but I feel like nobody, in contrast to people like, say, like the Dixie Chicks or something, like, I don't know. You think in like the punk world, maybe that just shows you how like depoliticized and maybe how inherently right-wing punk music is.
Yeah. This is like, there's holes, I think, this is the Drive article that I'm reading now, and there's like holes in Tom DeLonge's I mean, he obviously is working very closely with Louis Elizondo, and like, the connection of Chris Mellon to the Stars is always like sort of concealed whenever he's represented as like this independent like whistleblower guy, but really all these figures who are like doing this rollout are connected, and there's holes in like what Tom DeLonge also says, like this is from the Drive. Whoever, has led this push to investigate Tom DeLonge on the Drive, shout out anyway. Tom is clearly a highly creative, passionate, talented, and resourceful guy. It is remarkable what he has accomplished regardless of the circumstances, and in so many ways, many people who have had a high interest in this topic can't help but root for To the Stars Academy's success. At the same time, considering the incredible subject matter and Tom's own words, we can't be naive as to the other forces potentially at play when it comes to the Stars Academy and the information and products it distributes. Doing so would be directly in opposition to what everyone's goal should be, finding out the truth regardless of if it fulfills personal wishes or reinforces long-standing beliefs. The U.S. government has a history of using the prominence of UFOs in popular culture and the media to their advantage and has even worked to perpetuate narratives about them that support its clandestine goals. This is not a rumor or a takeaway, it is a historical fact that can't be denied. We aren't going to dive deeply into all the potential reasons for the government to want to make a new approach when it comes to this topic, but they range from full-on disclosure and conditioning for that event to pushing misinformation to protect clandestine programs, regardless of their technological origin. We talked about all this. But as I've said many times before, the sky will look very different than it has in the past in years and decades to come. Swarming drones, advanced unmanned combat air vehicles, hypersonic weapons, new low observable aircraft designs, directed energy weapons of many types, the rapid militarization of space, and even active camouflage and advanced aircraft are just some of the things that will be present overhead in the not-too-distant future, if they are not already. In addition, the U.S. military and its contractor partners could have made major breakthroughs in exotic propulsion technologies within the deeply classified realm that would all but require a good cover story, at least for the time being. Just as during the height of the Cold War, being able to easily discount sightings of exotic flying machines and aerospace capabilities can be quite advantageous, and especially in an age when everyone has a high-definition video camera in their pocket. Sadly, we are now also living in a time when great power competition is once again a very real thing. This means a burst in clandestine weapons research and development and the rapid fielding of new military capabilities. Also, just tying up a foreign power's intelligence gathering resources by having them invest heavily into trying to discern if the U.S. has a new exotic weapons capability or if threats the U.S. armed services say exist are out of its and are out of its control are indeed real can be a highly advantageous strategic ploy. So to get down to Tom DeLonge, in other words, it's really hard to understand how To the Stars Academy would be a better choice for this information than, say, Lincoln Labs. That is, if we are to believe Tom's story and his claims, the shadowy government figures that opened so many doors for him actually had genuine intent, and that they more or less chose him for such a reality-changing task after hearing his pitch. But then again, maybe that's the whole idea. The information may have to live in a gray area of plausibility for a long period of time before people are conditioned to accept it as hard fact. Is Tom DeLonge a so-called useful idiot in espionage parlance? Someone being used unwillingly via catering to their visions of grandeur and Hollywood tropes of cloak and dagger adventure? That would explain why his story of assembling his remarkable team seems to be a bit too convenient. Or is he shepherding in a new era that could end in fantastic realizations that could shake the very nature of our society and possibly even human consciousness? We are not capable of answering that question definitively at this time, but by Tom DeLonge's own repeated admissions, it seems the government is, or at least was, a key and even managing partner in his now very high-profile endeavor. If this isn't actually the case, Tom largely lied about how it all came to be, and we really shouldn't be buying much of what he or To the Stars Academy are peddling anyway. And they say, in an update, and this is in 2019 in June, NASA has gotten back to us about DeLonge's claims that he met with officials at NASA, and in particular at Ames Research Center. I specifically inquired for the 2016 and the prior time frame. Their response reads in part, I've checked with a few centers and none of them have records of issuing a visitor's badge to Mr. DeLonge, including Ames. So, he's perpetuating shit as well.
Yeah. And I was just taking a second there to look, and there are pictures of him posing with a Prince Hall Freemason group wearing an apron. So I think... I assume that photo is genuine. He also has a jacket with a bunch of Freemasonic symbols all over it. So he's very into being a Mason. And
this is such a sus Tom DeLonge quote. This is what I said to a few of them, I guess, the people he was pitching on his idea. I was like, do you know what this would do? It would change who we elect in office. It would change the amount of money we appropriate and allocate to these programs. We had the biggest space program that we've ever had, thousands of times bigger than Apollo, and it would be part defense and it would be part exploration, and people would run to be a part of it and help. It'd be like the day after 9/11, where everyone wanted to sign up to the military.
Oh,
great!
My God, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're calling out Blink-182 is a Defense Department psyop.
I just realized what 182 adds up to.
10?
11.
Oh, you're right. It does. Interesting. Interesting. And I will say also just a weird little synchronicity here. I just found a stock photo of Travis Barker playing in front of a big American flag during a USO benefit show in 2003 on the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier. So I assume that is what they were doing. They were there to play for the crew members of the USS Nimitz. Very interestingly,
that sounds familiar to me. Yeah,
well, it does because the USS. Yes,
yeah.
the very next year, the USS Nimitz was the aircraft carrier where the pilots encountered that Tic Tac UFO. And he was there just a little while. He's on that very same ship. It's like Jim Morrison's dad on the at the Gulf of Tonkin.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I think they're definitely up to something. I guess Angels and Airwaves as well is also that's his solo project now, and I guess that's
Angels and Airwaves.
Even the logo of it is like the Freemasonic.
Yeah, I remember
kind of
I remember emo girls like being into that in high school. Angels and Airwaves,
and I think I don't know, before we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to point out, like we were talking about, I forgot to mention earlier that the big thing about ETs and their big heads and everything, they look an awful lot like Iwas.
Yeah, they do.
Like Aleister
Lamb.
Crowley's
Lamb.
Lamb.
I don't know if Iwas. Yeah, I mean Iwas and Lamb are sometimes associated, I guess, but
Iwas had the portrait of the guy with the big head in 1904. But I guess I don't know if he
wasn't Lamb the one who
there were two.
It was Lamb. Iwas,
Iwas and Lamb were both.
Lamb is a Tibetan word for way or path, and Lama is he who goeth. It's a big title for the gods of Egypt, the treader of the path, in Buddhist phraseology. That was like what accompanied the picture of the being that kind of looks like a gray.
Yeah, and if you look up, like if you just type in Crowley like Lamb or Crowley Iwas, you'll even see like sketchings of like a gray next to Iwas, and also saying the drawing of a demon.
Iwas was the voice that kind of spoke to him. But in terms of Lamb was, I think, what was supposed to be that being. But anyway, in Magic and Theory and Practice, Iwas is firmly identified by Crowley as a devil, Satan, Lucifer, whose emblem is Baphomet. So
sus djinn UFOs is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that, definitely. And I mean, there's a famous thing about the association between the Greys and the Babylon working happening just before, like, these mass of, alien encounters that occurred, like the Babylon working, like, just preceded the...
Marjorie Cameron saw UFOs.
Right,
we went over that.
Well, she was saying that she saw, like, the flying saucers before, Kenneth Arnold famously named them. But, the Babylon working happened, in 1946. Mm-hmm. And Roswell happened in 1947. And, like, the first flying saucers were kind of being seen in 1947.
Yes, exactly. So they did pop up at this specific time, which I don't know. Part of me feels like, but
but I think that Valet's point that they didn't really is good because like it's just the way that they're perceived. It's the idea that they're saucers, and now like they're not even seeing really the saucers anymore. Like they do not look the way they look. Like they showed the McMinnville UFO in the documentary The Phenomenon. That does not look like the Tic Tac, because what we think of advanced technology as looking like is very different now, and like now these UFOs look like as you would, they don't look like, these like chrome saucers anymore.
Yes. But which again also could potentially track with the development of technology we actually have.
Yeah,
you could kind of take it either way, right? You could say this is...
What couldn't track with it is stuff like, you could make all sorts of different explanations. And again, like there's possibly like a separation between the UFO phenomenon and the abduction phenomenon and things like that.
Sure.
But, a lot of these UFO encounters, like, do involve sort of seeing beings. Like, it could be... Well, like, most of what they come out with in terms of To the Stars and, like, the whole thing with the New York Times doesn't deal with, like, the more out there aspects of this. But, like, these things that, like traditionally, like going back for a long time, they always have been associated with these other phenomena. And there's also this kind of wink-wink implication that they are this kind of threat that, like, we don't know, like, where it comes from, that they could come from outer space. Astronauts have encountered them, such and such. So it kind of is winking at that, even though they're talking about them in terms of these advanced aircraft. And, like, that kind of does track with the idea, like, oh, we're going to provide these metals to you. The alchemy, like the metals, the metal, exotic metallurgy, like it's all, but, it's, so that, like, is very much in their kind of wheelhouse of, like, trying to show, like, the strategic value of this and trying to make everyone sign up for the military, like, after 9/11.
Yeah.
But, like, really, if you think about this phenomenon, like, they're, like, people have experienced this, like, for a long time. People have been abducted forever, like, by fairies, by, like, all sorts of beings. Like, even in the Salem accounts, like, where someone would find themselves unable to move, and, like, a monkey being would come in through their window, and they would try to, like, attack it, but they wouldn't be able to. This is, like, tracks perfectly with some of these UFO experiences. You can say, like, well, the same thing, because there's sleep paralysis, and, like, yeah, fine, but, like, the fact is that, there's always outliers. Maybe in some cases it is sleep paralysis, but, like, whatever the phenomenon is, it's experienced as something different. It has these features, and they are associated with, like, this UFO thing. Like, the UFOs appear before it, like in the Betty and Barney Hill incident, they saw the UFO first, it's so like, I don't know, like, I don't know, like, if I just think it's like technology getting more and more sophisticated, because I feel like the tropes of it have existed for so long. Is like, again, like, is the airship thing true? Like, was that really, like, Thomas Edison's flying, like, UFO thing with these big propellers or whatever, like a steampunk UFO? Like, I don't know. Like, there's something more to it. Like, and all these weird, but who knows?
All I can say is I'm excited. Our next episode is going to be, we're jumping back behind the the other side of the Iron Curtain again, and I think we'll dive deeper into what the Soviet scientists were thinking about all this phenomena, and maybe that'll help shed some light on the immense I don't know, is it Dracularity with the UFOs? It kind of isn't, because I feel like, I don't know, like the actual impact of them is so ambiguous that it's
I think that
maybe there's a different term to come up, like
perhaps
infinite slipperiness.
There is a certain Dracularity to the UFOs, but it's a bit different because, in a way, the UFOs have, like, a greater Dracularity than Dracula almost, but I feel like they are, like, in a way on the same continuum. Dracula, there is not maybe as ambiguous but Dracula also has, like, a certain seductiveness, definitely. Like, even in the original story, there's, like, an allure to Dracula, and I think
some of these ETs do, I mean, the ones that want to help us,
Yeah, even, let's show you a star map, like, and I think that, the whole idea of the dead, like, and the connection between aliens and the dead. I mean, if you think about Plan 9 from Outer Space, what was their plan? To resurrect the dead. Like, the comet appeared in Night of the Living Dead, and that was what sort of caused these zombies to rise. That's an interesting kind of wrinkle. I'd be interested to learn, like, what, that sort of
the spirit alien connection in a way.
I mean, well, if you think about, like, the witches' Sabbath, what do they do? The whole myth of it is that, or the whole topos of it is that they're in their beds and they go somewhere to, like, congregate with this goat being, and, like, worship it or whatever and fly in the air.
So
and
they're doing remote viewing, and then they
they're kind of doing
djinn, and
they're kind of doing remote viewing, but they're also kind of, like, being taken away, through the air. Like, that's what abductees describe, like, and a lot of the time, like, they're going maybe astrally or something, and sometimes they're going physically, but, like, the nighttime flight, to, like, this distant place to commune with these other beings, and the, like, the folkloric like tropes of this are very common into like many different figurations. So I don't know, like there's there's something going on here. I mean, and I think we did a good job. Yeah, there's some, we need to have a total and complete shutdown on outer space until we can figure out what's going on.
I agree. Okay, so I think for now we can leave it there. We're gonna probably, there's a few vectors that we touched on, I think, in this.
Yeah, we didn't really get into Blue Beam, but I feel like Blue Beam could maybe be its own app. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably could be, because actually I didn't realize how interesting the French Canadian guy who came up with that.
Monast,
and his kind of conspiracies about Masons and all this stuff, and how maybe that we could say that from the day, as well as Jacques Vallée, who has a lot of interest.
I think that when we do Mothman, going into some of his stuff and some of John Keel's stuff, which is kind of in a similar vein, will be good.
No, for sure. But
because we're doing Mothman one day, maybe
we're definitely doing Mothman, and the more I see, the more I think there, maybe there's a little more meat on those bones. If Jacques Vallée was so interested, But next time on the Alwara Frequency on Patreon, we'll be tackling the immense topic of Soviet parapsychology research, and I think we'll be able to do a little compare and contrast for the first time. All this spooky Stanford stuff.
We'll be learning all about their plots to put little dwarves in a glider. And
we'll see if that comes
over
up.
The desert.
We'll see if it comes up. But that'll be coming up next. So until next time. Don't believe in like right-wing pop punk guitarists who are Freemasons, and
keep your eyes on the sky.
Keep your eyes on
both for beings little and large. Watch out.
Watch the History Channel. Have fun. But don't get psyoped.
Yes. Don't get psyoped. If you encounter a steampunk airship guy, insist on being brought aboard to take a look at his locomotive, or his air locomotive, or what have you. Yes. And I think that's it. I'm trying to think of some old Blink-182 quotes. I noticed that didn't they do Adam's song? Am I right?
Yes.
I noticed that like one of their things for like it was like the materials. It was like something like alternative dynamic like aerospace materials or whatever, like Atom or whatever.
Oh, so
maybe it traced the cord back to the wall. It was actually powered by perpetual energy.
Wow. Okay, so everybody go back and listen to Enema of the State. Even that title is kind of sus. But go listen to Blink-182. Don't get psyoped by it. And until next time, dear listeners, stay vigilant.
Peace.
Eyes turned upward, clutching souvenirs, carrying our highest hopes and our darkest fears. They swear there was an accident back in 47. Little man with a great big head splattered down from heaven. Government conspiracy. closer, find Orlando's rat and hug it. Go screaming through the universe just to get McNuggets. But I don't think so, I don't think so. It's much too dangerous, it's much too strange.